Welcome, everyone, to Counterpoint Apologetics. And tonight we're going to be doing a book review of Michael Burgos' book, Against Oneness Pentecostalism. Tonight we're going to be covering John 1. And the previous episodes we had of this book review is we covered Hebrews 1, Colossians 1, and the beginning of Mr. Burgos' book. So tonight we want to cover John 1, which is one of the primary scriptures that we do discuss when engaging Trinitarians. So we want to definitely engage in some of the points that he makes, and also bring out some points that make Trinitarianism very inconsistent when they apply their view of God and how John 1:1 relates in the text. So tonight I want to add my fellow co-host on, and welcome Brother Nero and Tim Smith. How y'all doing?
Hey, good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Yeah, so this should be a very interesting discussion because let's just face it, this is one of the primary texts that people bring up, and in the discussion of who Jesus is, and ultimately in the relationship of how God exists in the scriptures. And the John 1 in the prologue is definitely one of the hot topics that always happens when you're talking about the God of the Bible. So, Brother Nero, what would you like to bring up to start us off on a discussion on this?
Well, I guess there's so much going on with it, as far as the grammar, and so, some of the points throughout the chapters we study, I think they're legitimate critiques, some of them grammatically. And I think one of the things I think we have to get better with, not only external critique, but internal critique. But I think that really we need to acknowledge, like, okay, we could have said this a little bit better in the past. But let me pull up my notes here because I got them typed up. Actually, I will say, after having debated Dr. Burgos, and he's very quick on his feet. So a lot of I feel that his book, as my notes are moving slow, I feel like his book is really tailored to, it's really to help you argue. And I think it's really designed in that way. And I think that's his strength. I'm having a few technical. Must be the enemy. There we go. Let me see, pull it up. Okay. And all right. And I think one of the things I like to hit on is maybe literary or historical context, because I think one of the big misconceptions is that just because John is writing in Greek doesn't necessarily mean he's thinking in Greek. And one of the things we were talking earlier is that there was almost this kind of, in one of the footnotes, this nonchalant kind of, well, we don't have to really pay that much attention to it. But I guess I would argue, are we really doing solid exegesis if we don't? And maybe I'll start with clause 1, in arche, in ho logos. And I think Dr. Burgos, he sees the opening as a deliberate invocation of Genesis 1:1, which I agree with that. I think when you look at the Septuagint, as he stated, it almost takes it well, no, that was another book, but it's like verbatim. I wouldn't see any reason to argue against that. But I think where he kind of hits the ground running with his presuppositional Christology already in place, he uses the imperfect aim with a ganato in verses 3, 6, and 14. But it's that aim, the way that he uses it, which I don't think it's anything wrong with believing the Logos is eternal within this context. But at most, what it is saying grammatically is that at the beginning, the Logos was there. So you already have at least pre-existence. And I know that may seem like kind of a little bit of a thing to kind of have an issue with because I believe the Logos is expression of God and it's eternal. But I want to keep it as grammatically consistent with what the writer actually said, because there could be a reason for that. And especially with my opinion, I think it's written in a wisdom Christology. And when you look at the wisdom language, wisdom is described as being created. She is given her introduction at creation. And so probably in his well-intentioned zeal to preserve what he would consider the deity of Christ, just that small detail may be robbing the hymn of one of its many connections to the wisdom genre.
Yeah, those are great points. I would totally agree. Tim?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when it comes to this aspect of historical context. As Oneness Pentecostals, we hold to the grammatical historical method. We really like to focus on the historical context and how not just what does my theology say and how can I kind of put a good consistent systematic ideal of what the 66 books say, but actually what was the original intention of the authors and how were they the kind of categories they were thinking in. I found that really interesting how in his book, and we'll kind of get into a little bit more later tonight, but how, again, in his footnotes and in some of his commentary on John 1, he recognizes some of the inspirations of the prologue and what inspired John in the way he did, but he thinks it's unnecessary to focus on that in order to try to understand how John describes the Logos. I find that really problematic. And I know he says he goes into more detail in one of his later chapters in his footnote when he's talking about this in this chapter. We won't get to that tonight when it comes to the later comments on how he sees proto-Trinitarian ideology in the Old Testament. We'll get that a later night when we're covering that chapter. But nonetheless, I find that a little bit egregious to kind of toss it away. It kind of puts a smokescreen when it comes to the context. It's like throwing, again, we have this clear room where we're seeing the worldview of John, and we're going to throw a smoke bomb and say we don't really need that. We just need what he plainly says. And I think we could translate that very well into what Reformed ideology, what Reformed Baptists have to say with their theology. That's really what he's meaning by context there.
Mm. Yeah, shock there. Yes, so let's go on and get into the some of the text, and let me go on and.
It's why he primarily focuses with uses ESV. It's just.
Yeah,
I'm just poking fun at this point. I know there's
the standard version.
Yeah. All right, so we'll start from part of his book right here, and of course he brings up in his prologue of John on page 49, I believe it is, or going into 48 into 49, and he brings up and quotes that. He says, above the text with familiar words in the beginning, which are certainly intended to invoke Genesis 1:1, which we would agree with, John, by placing the word in the place where we might expect God, has already identified the word with Yahweh. Throughout verse 1 and 2, John utilizes imperfect verb of being in, thereby indicating that the word was in existence before the beginning. I don't have a problem with that. I think that goes perfect with my view or anyone else's view here, is that the logos or wisdom is literally the very source and reality of God's intent. So it's that which is being brought forth. So I don't have a problem with that.
Right. Which is interesting, though, because he does kind of open up to the aspect that Bernard, and he quotes some one of his commentators, how they don't have really a problem with too much of that either. They just simply would interpret the word differently than he is. So really his contention is not with us on our view of where the word exists, but so much in his form, I guess, how the Word exist? Does it exist as an, a distinct person within the Godhead, or is it existing as God's self-expression and God's wisdom?
Mhm.
And I know I'm being really nitpicky on this point, probably because I was arguing with somebody about the aim, and it seems like it's such a minuscule point, but because I know they so desperately need eternality of the Son, that sometimes I think, and I want to make sure at least I'm critiquing their grammatical usage consistently, but it's from a technical standpoint. That's why I say, unless you're just arguing from context, it is the imperfect, active, indicative, third, singular. And I guess just because, we can say contextually, we can use it that way, but technically it's only saying eternal. It's, I think we may be giving them a little bit too much room to build this eternal person premise. And it's a neither here nor issue. Nobody's Christology is going to stand, but I personally have kind of strong feelings about it. Does it mean anything? Probably not. My wife says I'm a little bit extra sometimes. But I just wonder, are we already giving them enough rope to kind of start pulling in a way that's not justified?
Well, that's true. And the thing is, though, nowhere does it demand eternal. They want it to be that. But there's nothing in that demands it. And what you're going to find out, guess what? When we actually get into some of the arguments, none of it matters anyway, because if you're a true classical, good luck defining this. I'm just going to tell you now, because
I can't wait to see. Oh, you on?
Yeah, no, we're gonna push the buttons tonight, folks.
Yeah.
On
for sure.
The quality of what their claims are.
Yeah.
Because we're not just going to allow labels to stand. You're going to have to define what Logos is.
Right.
You just can't say it's a second person, it's Jesus. No. What is that quality of existence? Instead of throwing labels out, we demand more than that. We're getting down to the what means what and how it relates. Trinitarians are always talking about how relations are. Well, you're going to have to answer those questions tonight, folks.
Yeah.
So.
And he tries to answer them in this, but I mean, we've all read this beforehand. There's some questions. I mean, when we, with previous chapters with this definition of person and whatnot, there's definitely some questions. And we start wondering, is he really a classical Trinitarian? He's definitely got some red flags coming up here, and it continues in this chapter. I was reading through it again today before this, and it gets pretty questionable.
Yeah. Just slightly, it definitely brings in some questions. The use of "in" is distinguished from verses 3 and 6 and 14, wherein the verb is employed to communicate something coming to exist or coming to a place. Therefore, given the placement of the word within John 1:1a, in the same way that personhood and eternality of God is assumed in Genesis 1:1, the personhood and eternality of the word ought to be assumed. That's pretty dangerous, folks. Assumed? How about build that bridge first? We like to build bridges around here and prove the economy of what it means. Assumed. That's an extremely dangerous thing to do. And we're going to find out why. That part right there just blew me away. Like the first clause, the apostle has placed the word in the nominative case within the second clause, indicating this is intention is to tell his audience about the word. The preposition used to distinguish the word and God is pros, is used as a marker of association. Great. Often with the implication of interrelationships. Wow. Morris has noted that if one were to take a Wooden translation of the term, the clause would be rendered the word was toward God. Okay. As pros generally indicates movement toward an object. However, Wallace has identified that in the phrase. The preposition and the verb do not match. The verb is accusative and the preposition is transitive. Thus, the context dictates the preposition be translated with. Okay. We're going to ask what with is tonight, folks. What is with?
Right. But yeah, exactly. Because again, when we start getting into context, he dismisses it. So I don't, it's like you agree with him there, but then He starts dismissing some of the background information.
Yeah, and the thing is, when you get into proston theon and all that, and face, it just gets comical at some point.
Right.
You just
Right.
got social Trinitarians just literally saying some really crazy things.
Right.
Right.
That's so true. No, so true. And I don't know because he cites that one phrase they said, a marker of association, often with the implication of relationships. He does cite somebody, and that's not his own words, but I haven't had a chance to really actually fact check or see like where is that person coming from when they're talking. So I mean, I couldn't really give too much comment there, but I do find that quotation rather interesting.
Do you have anything, Brother Neil? Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that's another thing when we're dealing with clause B there, because that pros, there's a lot of flexibility with that, and I had some grammatical examples, but I would say like even if we accepted his grammatical framework, without the context, you still leave it just it's pretty weak. And I think Wisdom of Solomon 9:4 verse 9:10, wisdom of course is described as sitting beside the throne with God and knowledgeable of his works. In contextually, well, how can I say, thought wise. And I think Rendell Harris does a pretty good job of, which is one of my favorite authors on it. He points out all of the wisdom literature that deals with them being with God conceptually. So there is a conceptual precedent for this that does not require, because, to me, I think when he says, okay, process this, I think Dr. Burgos really he crosses the ontological aisle without really earning it. And it's like, I understand that's your framework, but why should I care? Especially when there are other valuable alternatives.
Yep. And so this is an area where I want to get in. So since we're in at the pros area, I want to take us down a little lane of thought, right? Since we're at the pros now. But the problem is that the first thing we must establish, everyone, is the one thing that is the most important thing in John 1a, b, and c. And that is, what is Logos? What is it? See, it's with, right? It's with God. It was in the beginning. Great. I don't want a label. I don't want just simply something that it's Jesus. Okay, great. But you have to define what the quality of that with is. That's the problem. And what happens is it's with or it's toward. Yeah, okay, great. I have no problem with whatever you want to put there, because ultimately you're going to have to define what the economic values, relations, properties, and how it exists, because you've demanded with, right? So in John 1a, in the beginning was the Logos. But Burgos says the Logos already existed before creation. Okay, I grant that. But before we substitute second divine person for Logos, which, remember, he said we must assume that it's personal and that his way is he wants it done. So instead of substituting second person for Logos, define what this Logos actually is under classical Trinitarian doctrine, right? Eternal tells us when the Logos exists relative to creation. It does not tell us what kind of subject the Logos is. Burgos cannot treat Logos as though it were simply a proper name, meaning the second divine person, Jesus, or whatever usage you would like there as a personal reference. That is the conclusion he is trying to prove, not the definition John has supplied. Under classical Trinitarianism, the Logos is not another divine substance. It's not another divine essence. It's not another divine nature. It is not another instance of deity. It is not another divine existence. Not another divine intellect. Not another divine act of knowing. Not another divine will. Not another act of divine willing. Not another act of divine power. Not another act of divine operation, not another act of source of absolute divine perfection. And under strict classical theology, not another independent center of divine consciousness. So when Burgos says the Logos was already there, okay, he's established eternal existence, but he has not established another independent constituted rational subject or whatever he wants. Because see, he has to define the uniqueness of what Logos is when you say with God. Never mind the simple basic understanding is there's only one God, and this Logos is with the one God. So you have to jump a premise and make a bridge of how this exists. So his own metaphysics actually make the inference much harder because he virtually every ordinary feature which he must distinguish as some type of subject from another is explicitly denied. So the first question is, what is Logos positively? It is not another substance, mind, will, nature, power, operation, or independent rational actuality. If the answer is simply the second person, nothing has been defined. The conclusion has merely been inserted into the Logos and then read back into the text. So basically, you're just saying it's this, but you haven't really defined what this with is at all. So in the beginning was the Logos. Establishes that the Logos precedes creation. It does not establish another divine mind or another independent constituted rational being. Eternal existence tells me that the Logos is not created. It does not tell me that the Logos is another divine who. Burgos can call the Logos a second person. He has to explain what the person positively consists of and what every ordinary substantive marker of another rational subject is denied by his own theology. So that's the thing, because if you're a oneness person, you always hear this argument from Trinitarians, right? You hear what? Well, Bernard says in the beginning was the thought or the plan. So in the beginning was the thought, the plan was with God, and the thought and plan was God. Okay, so you defined Logos according to ours and did a replacement, right? That's fair, even though I would not necessarily agree it's limited to that. That's a very shallow meaning, in my opinion. It's very 2D in a 3D world. But the point is very clearly that substitution is a valid argument, right? So now, Trinitarians, what we must do is define the quality that is distinct from the Father, since it is one substance, essence, and nature, and they are identical in every way except eternal relations of origin. And therefore, there is no division in God. So what is the distinctive that is with God? A relation, an eternal relation, but yet there's no distinction. How does that work? How does that exist? What does it mean? And was God? Okay, so there's no actual distinctive that was with God and was God. So, and if it's the Father is the source of the nature, substance, and all that, and they share in it, but it's not the Father is the only ase and unoriginated one, and they share in the Father's essence, substance, right, in nature. What's left? What's this with? How does it work if it's eternal? You must define this than just simply throwing a label out there. You have to define it because you have to define those specific properties, those specific qualities, if it's eternal. Now, if it's ad extra, we can understand this relation as the divine ad extra reality by which all things are brought forth, God's wisdom. That makes sense. But to force an eternal quality and then simply say, okay, well, I can just do that without actually defining it, that's extremely problematic. And we're definitely going to get further into that as we go on. FTC, Brother Nero, anything on that?
No, that's pretty thorough. I don't know if Brother Nero has anything.
I believe it.
Oh, I think you're, was that me or?
Oh, there we go.
Oh, yeah, we can hear you now.
Moving slow. I'm like, this is a Mac. You're not supposed to do that. But, But no, I think that's very good. And also, I was just thinking again. I said, seeing that the expanse of the use of the word of logos. I mean, it's even in that time, it is a large application. How does one justify which of the lexical meanings that they're going to establish in their exegesis? And I would agree. Let me preface this. I want to say I'm thoroughly appreciative for Brother Bernard's writing on the oneness of God. So I'm saying, please don't take my license. But just kidding. No, I think logos, the concept is true, but it's insufficient to answer all of the questions we need grammatically, contextually. I think it is a big part of it, but I think to leave it at logos, you're leaving yourself open for attack.
Yeah, like I said, it's a very 2D usage to me in a 3D world. And it's not that it's not those things. The problem is that you've basically argued like 2 of the 10 elements of something, right? Yeah, that's part of it, but that's not the whole reality. And once you start getting into the history and the application of the Old Testament into the New Testament, you see where this comes from. That's the thing. If the logos is simply just a subsisting relation, how does anyone really understand John's usage? Because he has to gather from something, right? He has to gather that what this quality means. And if you're going to do substitution for logos and the quality and property is what it is, then you have to answer those questions. Because if there's no distinction and there's really just as a subsisting relation that's an eternal relation of origin, what are you actually arguing? What is this quality? Go on.
A lot of them really don't know because they pull that, it's a subsistent reality. And I said, okay, what is that? Well, it's instead of saying person, we say this, and it deals with point of origin. I said, well, I could say that if you let me divine some things I want to, because I'm like, if it's a subsistent reality, conceptually, I could say that the logos is the express form of his wisdom, which is internal. So I'm like, if that's what you mean by subsistent reality, and you're not really talking about a real threeness there, but most of them I find are very uncomfortable driving it to its logical conclusion.
Yeah, and one of the big things that we've heard before, and I know Tim has heard this one before, because with is used specifically in term in relationship to other humans, right? Well, therefore, the word must be in the sense of person. No. And the reason why is because you're not talking about just regular human relations. We're talking about God's existence and his logos.
Yeah, and they would even have to qualify that.
Yeah.
They couldn't take that to the full extent. They'd have to be begging the question.
Yeah, because metaphysics and existence.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because metaphysics and how God exists in relation, because your word, these things are with you, right? Scripture even uses these terms that these things are with you. So when you get into the economy of existence, you just can't say, well, there's persons here and with is used X amount of times. Well, that's because humans are talking to other humans. That's the reason why. But when you go to God's economy and how God exists in relationship to creation, that's a total different paradigm of existence. You just don't apply the same metaphysics to God as you do normal relations in everything. The word pros doesn't demand that at any point. Is it used that way? Yes. But to simply just force it on John 1 in relationship to the basic term logos, how in the world does that demand that? It's his logos. Is your logos another person? Oh, it's not the same thing. Well, no. As an existing thing, my logos is not the same as God's logos. No. But there is an economy of similarity.
A functional, like you say, correlation there. I mean, exactly. Paul does it with the spirit, searching deep things of God in the human person. So I'm like, the apostles were obviously comfortable using shock alert that Mago Dei to explain God.
Exactly right. So when you're doing this, yes, there is a difference between my verbal word than God's expressive word, the essence and difference of that. Great. That's not the point. The point is how the economy relates to the source. Word automatically relates to source. There is no other way you can understand that. It's not an independent thing. It correlates to something. It's from something. It's out from something. It doesn't originate in itself. It's a byproduct of something. So when you're sitting there going, oh, well, and when Trinitarians argue this, okay, the Father is the source of all thought, will, and action in the Trinity. How are you going to work with that, Trinitarians, when this word is not an originating, it's not an originator in the relations? And then when you get to one action or one act and inseparable operations, does the Logos have its own Logos? And does that Logos have its own Logos? Shall we get into infinite regression, anyone? So these are very difficult things you have to answer. You just can't just say with means, well, that just means persons. No. You have to define what with is, and you're going to have to find out where is this actual quality of distinction when everything is identical on all the things I brought up. Good luck. All right. Now I got to find out where after all my talking. Okay, right here. Carson has observed in all but one or two peculiar constructions, 1 Peter 3:15, pros may mean with only when a person is with a person. There he goes. Usually in some fairly intimate relationship. And that suggests that John may be pointing out rather subtly that the word he is talking about is a person with God and therefore distinguishes from God, enjoying personal relationship with him. What does this mean here? This sounds awful close to social Trinitarianism.
Like they're giving each other eternal hugs and stuff.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, man, you want to say they're not persons like human persons, then proceed to use personal analogy.
And notice how he uses words fairly intimate relationship. And then he's going to like bleed this over into the rest of it. Okay, great. That suggests that John may be pointing out that rather subtly the word is talking about is a person with God, therefore distinguished from God. What is a person? What do you mean? Does a normal usage of person in these relationships that you're bringing up, do these persons have the same mind, the same will, and they're one act, same substance, essence, and nature? Are they identical? See how this falls apart, folks? They correlate a relation, but then they don't back up what that relation is. They want you to fill in the blanks.
They just assume that. And I was having this conversation with a friend rather who is, I respect anybody that, takes their tradition and faith. But I told him, I said, that's your choice, not mine. And I said, to be honest with you, anyone who doesn't show me how they got to their conclusion, I don't care if church father, anybody else, I'm going to question it. And to me, a lot of these guys, they just know they're right on it. And I'm like, how did you prove that? Like, what were the steps you took to make sure that was the most? It just kind of like, oh, it must be it's just like they don't even try anymore.
Yeah. And I think it is important to note that this is a quotation of D.A. Carson. Now he's definitely in agreement with this quotation, but these aren't his words exactly. These are D.A. Carson's words, but it just shows you the mindset that it seems like D.A. Carson's not really sounding very classical here,
Yeah, but I can bring up a quote where
Wasn't he a social guy, D.A. Carson?
I'm not sure.
That's a good question. I don't know. What does he claim to? Does he even claim to classical?
I don't know. I do know this, that the word that he uses there for word, and you want to talk about substitution. Do you know what D.A. Carson uses as a viable substitution for logos? Expression.
Yeah.
In the beginning was expression. The expression was with God, and the expression was God. That's correct. Go look up his article on John 1. It's free for everyone. Yes, he uses the word expression. So he finds that to be a valid, and D.A. Carson wrote a great commentary on John. Obviously, I don't agree with everything, but still a great commentary. He has a very good information in the front and in multiple areas. Appreciate his work. But notice, sorry, brother Nero, you had something you were saying. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good, because I did a quick search there. It's saying he's not like categorically a social Trinitarian like Craig and Hasker, but it's saying that his formulations he uses, like ideal community, it's like, I'm sorry, that's
you're already failing.
But he does.
They do not think the same thing. I'm like, yeah, so that's interesting. If these are the sources Dr. Burgos is using, I mean, it's kind of like covert social.
Right, and I think he believes in eternal functional subordinationism.
Oh, he does? Oh, wow. Yeah, that's bad. That's basically trashing. Wow. I was going to find. All right, here it is. Let's see. I'll read from his paper real quick, but D.A. Carson, just so y'all have a reference. We might, when we find Paul writing, the word of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. He does not mean the word cross is sort of stupid. He means the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. That is what is going on here. In the beginning was the message. In the beginning was the outward expression of God himself. We might almost paraphrase it as one translation does. In the beginning, God expressed himself, and God's self-expression was with God, and God's self-expression was God. Why should John choose this word to describe the one who will ultimately be given the name Jesus? In due course, we will read the word became flesh, and then you are into the account of Jesus. There you go, folks.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. But that's on his article on John 1. Let's see. So he says, God in enjoying a personal relationship with him. God, please define these. See, I need to know economics, folks. Economy. What does that mean? I need to know the specifics. Naturally, the notion that John 1b is indicative of two persons is in no way compatible with oneness theology. Well, yeah, we agree. Thus, oneness interpreters led by Bernard have attempted to understand the clause in such a way that the difficulty of the word was with God is lessened. Bernard has argued, well, since you have not actually defined the quality of existence and properties of what it means to be word and what it means to be with. The Greek word pros, translated with in verse 1, is the same word translated pertaining to in Hebrews 2:17, 5:1, and 5:1. John 1:1 could include its meanings. Therefore, the following: the word pertained to God, and the word was God, or the word belonged to God and was God. In his text entitled Exegetical Fallacies, Carson identified a word study fallacy entitled Unwarranted Adoption of an Expanded Semantic Field. This fallacy occurs when an interpreter supposes that the meaning of a word in a specific context is much broader than the context itself allows and may bring with it the word's entire semantic range. While Bernard has not imported the entire semantic range of pros, he has illegitimately used the distinctive meaning of the preposition in Hebrews 2:17 and 5:1 as a means of lessening the force. Okay, but with doesn't hurt us.
Yeah, I will say, to give him credit here, I think his criticism of Bernard is correct, but I don't think it's a defeater for ultimately oneness theology. It does provide room to grow in our scholarship, but nonetheless, I think, and this is where Nero comes in with this idea of wisdom, Christology here, and in particularly where with connects, where pros connects with the literary figure of wisdom, of Lady Wisdom. So I think there is some more conversation to be had about that, and books that are going to be published about that. Um, and so
Yeah,
I wonder who's going to write that one or written that one.
I got my credit card ready, man.
Hey, look, I'm when this Ford comes out, I'm gonna get it out as fast as I can.
Yeah, just don't use it to buy a brand new car, Chris. But
oh yeah.
Anyways, so yeah, I hear you. Yeah, that's it's gonna, and I think that's gonna really just help broaden our perspective on Pross here. I don't think it adds up at all that this Pross must mean that this is a literal person, like how how you and I are talking to each other right now, and talking with each other. I don't see it as demanding that, given the wisdom tradition. But again, to his point, some of his criticisms of Bernard here, I think it's not completely unwarranted.
I would agree, because I think it's the one he uses in Hebrews. It's with the accusative, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Which I understand that that's a valid argument, but I would say he's very good at showing where Brother Bernard, at 26 years old, made this argument. But I think Pross, from some of my notes here, can mark association, orientation, presence, and interpersonal relation. But from what I understand, no preposition has a lexical feature that would just make it a second divine person. I think that's kind of where his interpretation is jumping in. And just looking at like 1 John 1:2, it has proston patera, the eternal life. Mark 6:3. Jesus' sisters. You can see that instance, but I can also see pros, ton, theon, dealing with the referent, that's peace. So I'm like, seemed like it could go both ways. What demands, what you're saying, the only way to read it? And it's interesting you didn't bring any of that up.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. And I think also to this point though, like with Bernard, and this could be, I don't know if I know he's doing a lot as our superintendent right now, so he has a lot of work going on. But this could be a point where he could possibly edit the book or provide an updated opinion on this. But to Burgos's credit here, Bernard has yet to do that, so I could see why he would still hold that as Bernard's current opinion, and until Bernard outright denies this section of his book, I could see why someone would.
It's a fair critique.
Huh?
Yeah, definitely. Because let's face it, Burgos only has the material in front of him that he can critique, right? So,
right.
I mean, it's not like Burgos is running from, different books or articles that Oneness have wrote. He's not running from that by any means. So he only has what he can argue with. And Bernard, obviously being the primary, he properly critiques him on it. Now, it doesn't prove he's right.
Exactly.
It's just a proper critique.
Yes.
It doesn't ultimately, even though Burgos has a good critique, it still doesn't mean he's right.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you provide the right solution. Correct.
Yeah. It doesn't mean you provide the right solution just because you potentially. I'm not going to say he negates it, but just because you potentially have a strong argument against it doesn't, one, negate the argument itself, and it doesn't mean that you have the solution. It just means what are the other possibilities out there? Because you can
and it doesn't destroy the ultimate conclusion from a oneness standpoint. It just may have wrecked a particular argument that prominent oneness thinkers have thought before. So it more like we need to go back to the drawing board on a particular point rather than, oh man, he has just put our entire position in shambles.
Yeah, and I think it's because we kind of let them just take us into that narrow, because they know, I think he knows a little bit interpretively how a lot of us think. If the Bible says that we have a tendency to just, and I think we should, let me make sure I make that clear. But I think part of it is like we let them make us get tunnel vision when it comes to the grammar, and grammar is only one part of the hermeneutical process. And that's why one of my key proposals, like, what if grammatically, can we use Trinitarian exegesis on the language and still come to a oneness conclusion? And I think we can, if we just want to avoid arguing it. There's so much out there that's never brought into the conversation that it makes you wonder, is it intentionally being avoided?
Right. And I think to that point, like, and it's not just because we want to be oneness no matter what. The point is does the historical context actually lead to Trinitarian conclusions? And before they mark us out as crazy, I mean, you got people like Dunn who actually has questioned his own systematic belief without denying it as the right systematic belief, but has questioned whether it's actually historically in there the way that many Trinitarians and definitely how Burgos seems to view. I mean, he's going as far to see a Trinitarian type language in the Old Testament, let alone the New Testament. You know, so
Trinitarianism.
yeah, you get to tell the two extremes there, and I think when you have people like Dunn, who's definitely Trinitarian, if you see even some of his most recent books before his passing, still question some of the if
Methodology.
you know the methodology that many Trinitarians have, but particularly if the authors, right, actually envisioned a Trinitarian conclusions the way that that we see kind of manifest today. Which
Go ahead.
Oh, I totally agree, because the problem is as I said before, see, notice Burgos is supplying us, right, with the reasoning why with cannot be what Bernard says. Great. But how does that prove your position in your own metaphysical existence of God? You just destroyed your own view, ultimately. Because it's not just simply saying, oh, it's personal. It's proving the metaphysics of what you mean by person and its ontological existence. Notice Trinitarians don't do that. They never relate this to the quality of existence in a classical view. Burgos hasn't helped himself at all here. If you really want to know what he's done, is he's cut his own legs off, because he's not dealing with metaphysics. He's not dealing with how this logos exists and what eternal relation is ultimately, whether it's brute or you have a psychological model. Let's say Mr. Burgos, maybe you're a psychological model of the Trinity. Let's do a little substitution work. In the beginning was self-knowledge. The self-knowledge was with God, and the self-knowledge was God. How's that working for you? Now, what type of sense does that make? Wow, that's like saying, in the beginning was your mind. Your mind's with you, and the mind was you. What are you actually telling me? You're describing my own qualities of an existence? What is that? How does that even be understood? So when you say that it demands your position, you're going to have to work on what this actual logos is. You're going to have to do some substitution. Provide some actual economy of what it means. It's not going to work, because you basically simply just going for personal isn't helping you, because what is behind your usage of personal? I've already given you a huge list. You got to check those marks off. What's the distinctive factor of what with is? Good luck.
I think also the way talking about the psychology of classical Trinitarianism and the way that they are viewing things. If you see later down in this page that we're about to get to, it gets kind of worse when he starts talking about distinguishment between. We'll get to it. I'm not going to get too ahead of myself, but we're about to see it. It's going to be pretty crazy when we read it.
Real quick, with preposition, before with can mean one divine person personally existing with another divine person. Burgos must first establish what makes the Logos and God two distinct divine subjects. He cannot use with to prove the very personal distinction that his interpretation of with already assumes. The issue is not whether there is a relation. The issue is what grounds the two distinct realities that are supposedly to stand in that relation. Under classical Trinitarianism, that distinction cannot be another essence, substance, nature, intellect, will, consciousness, power, existence, or operation. Everything absolute remains numerically one. So the question is straightforward. What positively makes them two? If the answer is merely their relation, then the relation has simply been used to reinstate a distinction that it is supposed to explain. Just simply saying a relation doesn't give you the quality of what it is. You just described how. Well, it's begotten. What? In what way provides the distinction? Pros is not the later metaphysical doctrine. The word with does not itself mean eternal generation, begottenness, or filiation from the Father's essence, or opposed relations of origin, subsisting relation, or another hypostasis. Those are later metaphysical determinations used to explain what kind of relation the classical doctrine says exists. Generation and filiation do not solve grounding problem by themselves, because in the classical account, generation is the procession of or origin. Filiation is the relation by which the Son is said to be personally distinguished. Right? That's what we're getting into. Yet eternal generation introduces no new absolute divine actuality, no second essence, no intellect, no second will, power, operation, or divine life. So if there's no new introduction of anything as a second, what is the value of that?
Yeah. No, and to kind of go back to something Bernero said, because I don't want him to go up here and blast for De Niro, but Burgos, that is. But he actually does in a footnote reference the peace, like pros, when it's talking about peace in Romans 5 that you were talking about. It's in footnote 139. I don't know if you see it. But I think there is a flaw in his argumentation here still, but I want to give him due diligence that yes, right there. He does try to tackle it. But look at the final statement when he says further, peace as in Romans 5:1 is an impersonal subject by definition. But then when we start talking about the context of logos, we just need to let John speak for itself, speak for himself. We just need to accept him as personal, instead of recognizing maybe some of the literary genre that we're witnessing in the prologue. So it is amazing here that, and maybe to his point, maybe he would argue back and say that, well, he's just letting Roman speak for him, or, Paul and Roman speak for himself, and then John and John speak for himself, and we see personal pronouns with the logos, whereas it's impersonal, with peace. But nonetheless, don't we? And I don't want to skip too far, but when it comes to the language that he talks about with pronoun, like when he's arguing against our understanding of pronouns with the Father, or with the one true God, right? Doesn't God, or doesn't the Bible per se often personify impersonal objects? So when we see a personification of impersonal objects, should we just let the text speak for itself and realize that certain attributes are actually persons? Or should we look at the greater scheme of context here and understand the genre and the rhetorical devices that are being used here? So I think once again that he's seeing a qualification with the way that pros is used, or with the way that some of this language is being used with in Romans 5 with peace and all that and whatnot, and showing all the qualifications that he's having there. We realize that maybe John 1 has some qualifications that he's not actually accounting for, or that he's saying we don't really need to look at that. We can just let the text speak for itself, as he would put it.
Yeah.
Is that making sense? What I'm saying there, what I'm getting at?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I'm making sure, because I know when it makes sense in my head what I'm saying, but I want to make sure that outputs. Am I getting some of that
Yeah, I mean
dyslexic,
it's yeah, I mean
jumble?
yeah, I mean you're correct. I mean
Yeah.
you can't just you can't. It's playing both sides of the fence.
Mhm.
You're only
Right.
just taking what you want and then saying, "Well, it's good for me here, but you can't do the same thing." And it's just he literally
Yeah.
talks about exegetical fallacies, but that's literally, man, come on,
Right.
you
Right.
can't do that.
Right. Hey man, his sunglasses, his Trinitarian sunglasses are too dark. The shade is too dark.
Yeah.
Very narrow. Don't mumble if you yeah. um anyways, I don't know if y'all got anything else to add. I just wanted to, and Brandon, I don't mean I wasn't trying to put you on blast. I just rather me put that out there before if he ever saw this.
Well, you're fine.
He would be relentless.
We can be honest. Facts don't hurt my feelings. If I was
I know,
off, I'd
yeah.
be right.
Yeah. I just don't it would I don't think he would have been so kind about it, to be honest with you. So
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only person to tame that tiger has been him.
That is true. That is true.
If Burgos can give you high praise, that's some pretty high praise. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
In his debate,
he told me I was his favorite Oneness Pentecostal. I said, "Well, Lord help me to live up to it."
Yeah.
I think the next person Bro Nero needs to tame is James White. So you can get him on your side.
Yeah, man, James. Even though he's kind of calmed down in his later years, he's kind of like the guy at the company. Like, look, I've been doing this 30 years. I'm not learning the program. I'm almost done. He's just counting debates down. He's a lot more.
Up a few times.
Yeah, he's just kind of relaxed. And they're like, okay, believe what you want, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, his most recent video with Dan McClellan was kind of presupposition here, presupposition there, and there's some things I actually agreed with, but nonetheless, the way he went about it, I just can never disagree or never agree with the way that man just throws in his assumptions like they're facts.
Well, he got what happened is over the years, he would literally use Greek to Greek the debate, right?
Like all these scholars out here, you know what I mean?
Do you not know who I am?
Hey.
I'm James White. I mean, challenge my Greek.
Yeah.
And basically, people over time basically ran that argument and that ability in the ground.
Well,
and
no, I know what you mean. It just reminds me because my son, he's watching Cars on repeat, so we're watching all three of them, and it just kind of reminds me of Lightning McQueen in the first one, how he's the fastest car. No one can do what he does, and then Cars 3 comes around, and everyone can go faster than him because he's just old and everyone knows his game.
Yeah.
And it just reminds me of like how these biblical scholars are starting to come out on YouTube and stuff, and they're killing, because it's a difference between an apologist that knows a few tricks in Greek and then, actual scholars in the field. I'm not trying to dish too much. I'm not claiming to be that myself.
But what the number one thing they like to do is force Greek upon everything. So they literally carve out their doctrine from Greek. Not because metaphysics, economy, the whole exegetical reality of how it's being spoken of in the sense of not just simply man to man, the whole aspects, right? The background.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do more than just simply use the Greek. The Greek doesn't tell you everything. It just doesn't.
Right. And I think, and that's a good point because it really it is this, and we just watched it before our eyes with that footnote there. They like to play both ways. They want these wooden, because you're not against knowing the Greek language. It's they want these wooden. Look what he said verbatim here. It must mean this particular wooden translation of without any real historical context. It's just this Greek sentence right here. It's in a vacuum to them until it contradicts their ideology. We got Romans 5:1 here, for instance. And now we want to start looking into rhetorical devices and how, they're
very convenient
things that are actual, subjects that are not personal or can be used. That kind of language can be used, but it's just funny how that works, and I think this could be even a challenge to us to always hark back to the context, the historical context, to understand and try to get into the worldview of these authors in the audience, and not be so focused on um, always trying to find this wooden translation. Because ultimately, I think it does lead to a reader response theory. Let me translate this Greek into English, and when I put these English words into play, however I understand those words to become about, however my context dictates those words to be. That's what those words mean, not necessarily what the author actually intended. But,
Yep.
yeah.
And the problem is with, when Burgos, his thing is that when he uses pros, he makes it sound like two already, divine individuals standing in relationship. He doesn't
Yeah.
he doesn't qualify anything. He says, with presupposes distinction. But the problem is with doesn't create that. His own, and the problem is classical theology only does not give him a second substance, a second essence, a second mind, a second will, a second power, a second operation. There's no individuality, right, in those things. So if there's no individuality or independent existing actuality of these things, right, and they're identical, and there's no division, then what's this? What is it? It literally goes against everything he's trying to argue here.
Yeah.
And you're just, good luck, because you're going to have to get now. James White, we know he's becoming quite a social Trinitarian in denial. But I guess Burgos may be leaning him toward that way since he's a Reformed guy too.
I don't want to hold too long, but my suspicion is, especially in the West, because when you deal with the East, they didn't have the Enlightenment, they didn't have a lot of those things that really forced a lot of the Catholic, to really think critically, because they had the scholastics. And on these, they just kind of vacuum. They were just, we're good. They just were relaxed. And so even today, when you deal with a lot of them, when they're looking for apologetic material, the majority of the things are from a Western viewpoint, because I've heard some of them admit, apologetics, a lot of it hadn't really been carved out by them. So I think a lot of them, they may intend to be, but if that's all you have, or that's the main thing you're getting, I could see why a lot of them maybe not have realized they've taken things that are counterproductive to their tradition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's where they depart,
Right. And that's where it gets interesting with these next couple sentences, because he, like I said, the distinction he makes between God and the Word here, it's just interesting.
Are you talking about third clause right here?
Yeah, I think it's these next couple paragraphs. Yeah.
Let's go on and read them. The third clause states that the Word was God. The Word remains the subject, and the anarthrous predicate nominative theos takes the place of emphasis. The articular logos makes it plain that this is not a convertible proposition. That is one may not translate the clause "God was the Word" with grammatical justification. John has neither used theos indefinitely as the Arians, thereby invoking a theology alien to John's gospel, nor has he used theos definitely, thereby identifying the Word as the God whom he was with. Rather, as Wallace has forcefully argued, theos is to be taken qualitatively. Okay, great. We can agree with qualitatively or the definite.
Right.
It doesn't.
Right. It doesn't. Yeah. Right.
Right.
And I think when he says that he argues it, Wallace argues it forcefully, right? And I think what he cites here is I think it's a particular. It might have been a particular paper that Wallace had an article. I noticed he also cited Wallace in revisiting the corruption of the New Testament manuscripts, and it's a list of patristics and apocryphal Popocro. Oh my lord, there's my dyslexia. You know what I'm
Apocryphal.
talking about. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Literature, or evidence, and I think because that, if I'm not mistaken, that book, when I read through some of it, it's a book with a bunch of papers. So I think that was also an article, but nonetheless, when it comes to his actual grammar, I thought he left room, even though he argues for the qualitative sense. I thought he did leave room and realize that it's possible, that it doesn't demand
Well, the footnote.
qualitatively, right?
When he said
So
it is certainly said, although it's unlikely, but it is certainly possible. And to me, I was like, wait a minute, I thought you were a grammarian. Like all the nights, it seemed like your theology is touching your. Even though he tried, but I'm just like, I don't know. That's kind of odd for a grammarian all of a sudden be letting their theology lead them on the statement on what's grammatically possible. But you say he did give it.
Yeah. So I mean, when he says, I believe with Wallace's temperament that he probably could have forcefully argued something like that, but nonetheless, we still Wallace knows that other options are possible, even though he denies them
Don't want to be refuted
as
too.
the likely conclusion. Yeah. So I think that's important qualification when it comes to Wallace's work. But either way, like Chris said, I mean, I don't mind taking it qualitatively. In fact, these days I have taken it qualitatively, but that doesn't really affect it, especially given what Burgos seems to want to, kind of say doesn't matter, or that it doesn't really bring much burden to the actual, what John's getting at here. It doesn't change the meaning in a sense. This wisdom concept here,
Well, if John is still, dealing with Gnostics, what would this mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if John is dealing with Gnostics, does this fit their position?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Now it can be an assault on their position because you have the high God, the transcendent God, interacting with the world.
Exactly right. So it's not an either or. It potentially is both. That's the reason why you have such a weird construction. It's not that it's just simply definite. It's also qualitative because it's an ad extra reality.
Right.
That's the whole point. So I don't have to argue, especially when we get into the reality. I want y'all to think about something. If the Father is the source of all thought, will, and action in the Trinity, by which the Word and the Spirit are the power and the perfection of the Father's will, right? Okay, let's think about that for a second. So who is being realized by every means of action, ultimately? The Father. That's literally what Scripture tells you. Everything is by this, and it's the Father as the source. Trinitarians don't even disagree with that if you're classical. So, what does it mean in a Gnostic sense if John is arguing against Gnostics? Mm-hmm. He's talking about the realization of the material reality of God's word being made known and realized. And it is God. It's not an either or, it's both. Mm-hmm. So great. That's what literally wisdom is. Just saying.
Yeah. It's God expressing himself in and as creation, but nonetheless, there's a distinguishment because this expression is as creation. It's part of creative order.
Exactly.
In that sense. Or his expression is part of the creative order per se. Yeah.
I was just going to add, because I just thought about, one of the solutions I thought about, like, okay, let's accept that it's saying this is qualitative, because this exact phrase is weird construction, and I couldn't find anything like it in the Old Testament. It's this clause C to me is pretty novel. I'm thinking like, okay, if this is a quasi hypostasis, wouldn't it be effective if John is making it clear, saying, hey, you know what? And this is qualitatively God, because I don't want you to think, because I know in Colossae, they held the wisdom tradition in common. I can't remember if some of those Gnostic Johns were dealing with, but to me, I'm like, it's a clarification. I want you to know, like, even though I'm using our literature, this word is God. He's making it very clear, which is, as you have highlighted, he is literally declaring metaphysical war in the first verse.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because the word was God establishes what the Logos is. It's fully divine, right? It does not count a divine who. Even if you look at like Burgos under classical metaphysics, everything by which the logos is numerically. I want everyone to understand this. Everything by which the logos is God is numerically the same divine actuality as the Father. The same exact. There is no division or distinction in that sense. The same essence, the same nature, the same existence, intellect, will, power, life, knowledge, operation. According to the classical order, the Son is from the Father, from the Father's essence. So after every absolute distinction is removed, the whole list, the whole gamut, right? You take them all. There it is. The personal distinction left is what? Filiation. But then you have to explain how being from the Father alone constitutes this who. When no distinction.
It's not who in a normal sense.
Do what?
Because it's not who in the normal sense. It's just a point of origin, they tell us.
Yeah. So what does it even mean? That's the whole point. What does this mean, this with? And was God? They're not going to touch it. Because this is like when we get into John 3:16, folks. For God so loved the world that he gave his own self-knowledge. His own, how does that work? Psychological model, the Trinity. He gave the identical subsisting relation that doesn't have an originating quality in the relations, but only as the full essence of God as one act. He gave, what does it mean to give an eternal son that can't bleed, can't do this, can't do that?
Which technically it's all three of them with, like you mentioned, one act. So
exactly, it's one act. It's one operation. So what does it mean to give your son, right? So that's because the only natural understanding of the text is this man, Jesus Christ. That which is out of the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary. I shall be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. That guy. What does it mean to be the same mind, same will, same substance, essence, and nature, and giving it? Trinitarians literally tried to make the scriptures nonsensical when you start looking at what their economics and their properties entail. Right. It's nonsensical. They want to talk about
the same mind and will. Like, what does that even mean to get the same mind and will? It's just kind of like, that's wow.
Yeah, because once you start looking at what the actual properties of this, what this God gave, what's he giving? If it's not the actual incarnate Son, the man.
Yeah. But Chris, look at this. To continue your thought, just read the second paragraph here, though, at the ending of this, because this is what I was talking about, where it gets kind of no, you were there. You were there. Okay. Just continuing on, just that small paragraph right there before it says Bedard. Yeah, just in saying the word was God, right? John has not communicated a one-to-one identification of the word and God.
Yeah.
Right? But rather John has expressed the nature of the word. The word is as his nature, exactly like the God of the second clause. In verse 2, John again reiterates both the eternality and distinction between the Word and God. I think what's interesting about this is that where he doesn't say like the Word and the Father, he says the Word and God.
Yeah,
it's naturally
psychologically when you're looking at that, if John is saying this, right, and we're going to let John speak for himself, right? So the word is not just distinguished. It's not the Father being distinguished from the Son. It's the Word being distinguished from God.
Yeah, and that's the whole
That creates
problem.
problems with where,
Well, what's the first thing that they do, Tim and Brother Nero? What do they do when they bring it? When everyone goes to read John 1:1, what do they do? What's the substitution?
oh, they start conflating, God with Father and in this
Son is with the
context, right?
Father.
And we're with it, as Brother Nero said in one of his debates when he asked the question, like, God here is that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit? Well, it doesn't say, as that person answered. So they can't. I'm not saying now this isn't. I'm not saying that refers to Burgos here, but it's just funny how when we get into kind of the mess they create when they
It's the
try to.
Father when they needed to be, and this we don't know when they needed to be.
Right. So I think that's just a clear, distinguishment that we get. It's like Burgos. It doesn't say the Father is distinguished from the Son. It says God is distinguished from the Word.
Exactly. We're not going to substitute.
God, the Trinity.
In the beginning
right?
was Jesus.
Yeah.
That's what they like to do, right? In the beginning was Jesus, and Jesus was with God, and Jesus was God. That's the primary.
Well, and even if you do that, right, Jesus is still distinguished from God. And when you look at this concept of God that John's drawing from here, then you have to understand Old Testament wise,
that's more Arian.
When referring to God, it's not really referring to the Trinity, but it has to be referring to the Father. The bare minimum with Trinitarian, you have to say that John is doing something novel where he is encompassing Jesus into the divine identity. But right there by that nature, it has to show you that, like, by that logic, that God in the Old Testament that he's pulling from really only refers to the Father. Just kind of, I think it's more damaging than they realize. And they have to be anachronistic in order to avoid this. But in reality, right here in the sentence, he's not even realizing what he just did here when he says the Word is somehow distinguished from God. But
well, that's the first thing Trinitarians have to do. They pick and choose when it's God and when it's not God, right? Why? Because they have to play this switcheroo all throughout because it doesn't fit. Everyone read Paul. Paul very clearly makes the distinguishing factor of God, the Father, and the Lord Jesus Christ. Why? Because the first purpose of incarnation is to bring a Messiah who becomes the reigning Lord in creation, because it's an economical essentiality to what? Subdue creation. God has given man power and authority to reign over what God has given him from the beginning. So who is going to do that? The glorified man, Jesus Christ, who is the exact representation of his purpose. God's wisdom is enthroned over creation, in which we will see God in the face of Jesus Christ as the light of the lamp. That's how it works. So there must be an economic order that is subdued by lordship in creation. That's wisdom. God just doesn't crash his system. He makes contingency to fix the system. That's called wisdom, right? That's why we call it redundancy in the world of automotive, medical field. There's redundancy in systems to take care of the issues. Well, that's wisdom. God had a plan. That plan was found in Jesus Christ. That wisdom was ordered through the redemptive plan that was perfected, in which all creation and eternity be realized. Jesus Christ. All the ages were viewed within the focus of Jesus Christ, because God is wisdom, and he knows what he's ultimately knows what he's doing, guys. I know it. Sometimes we wonder, but pretty sure God had a plan. He's got a plan for you. He's got a plan for me. But sometimes we just don't like to think of that. And that's one thing you don't see in Scripture. You don't see redundancy of eternal Son and eternal and the incarnate Son. You never see dual qualifications. Oh, I'm only talking about the eternal Son here. If 1 Corinthians 15, that's who is where he has what's the phrase that he uses in 1 Corinthians 15? I'm losing it now.
I don't know the exact phrase you're referring to.
Oh, he's subjected.
Okay.
Jesus is not subjected, then he's subject, or he's subjected, then he's not subjected, and then he goes back to subjection again. Wait a minute. We're only talking about the eternal Son, not here right now. We're talking about the man. The man is only going through these roles of subjection. It's not the eternal Son. The eternal Son is still acting as he normally does. See, where's the correction here that everyone would be asking the question? Well, how is the eternal Son being subjected? Where's these qualifications that everyone would ask about the eternal Son in contrast to the man? The Son we know, we've seen, we've touched, which we looked upon. It's not there. And that's the problem. You never see these qualifications of distinction of eternal and incarnate Son, because it's essential.
Right.
But
I think after this, he starts getting into a series of quotes from like oneness scholars.
Oh yeah, right here. Yeah,
where it says Bernard, has articulated the identity of the word as follows.
Yeah, and the Word was not a separate person or a separate God anymore.
Right.
Then did I lose the text here or something?
No, then a man, you were there.
Then a man's word is
52.
separate. Yeah, a separate person from him. Rather, the Word was the thought, plan, or mind of God. The Word was with God in the beginning, and actually was God Himself. There exists an illogical element to the above characterization. If the Word is not a distinct person from the Father, but is at the same time the thought, plan, or mind of God, then the Word cannot be said to be personal and thus God Himself. Does anyone recognize the problem here with this argumentation from a metaphysical standpoint of a classical view?
Yeah. Keep going. No,
rather, the Word was the thought, plan, or mind of God. This is Bernard's argument, right? The Word was with God in the beginning and actually was God Himself. That's what he's saying is our argument, right?
Mm-hmm.
There exists an illogical element to the above characterization. If the Word is not a distinct person from the Father, but it is the same time the thought, plan, mind, or mind of God, then the Word cannot said to be personal and thus God Himself.
Yeah. Look, just to clear up his argument here, because you look at the rest of it, it says that is a thought is a non-personal conceptual entity, right? A plan is a non-personal conceptual entity. God is neither a thought nor a plan. Rather, God is a personal spirit. To suggest that a plan or thought is God Himself is to confuse a conceptual entity with an infinite and eternal being of God. With regard to the assertion that the Word is the mind of God, it must be noted that God's mind is not the same as God Himself. An element of a whole is not the whole, and neither is God's mind God Himself. And I think what he's kind of misunderstanding here with a lot of oneness theology is that part of this idea of God's mind is talking about really God's expression, God. And when you're talking about God's plan, right? A lot of people say like the plan is that Himself is going to save, right? Some oneness people would think that way. So I think although I get some of his criticisms of just planning, like you're talking about, a little, I guess in a sense, reductionistic or something, to just simply sum it all up that, oh yeah, this is just God's mind, right? There's definitely some nuance that oneness that we hold to, especially coming to the wisdom tradition, and really when you're looking at this idea and believe it and not actually, this is really interesting. Although I have some disagreements when it comes to some of their views on textual criticism, this is one of the things I think that some the Apostolic Classroom, this is where they kind of get correct on, is that it's not just simply the mind of God, right? It is God's expression. self-expression to be exact. And this plays right into the wisdom motif. God is expressing his wise interactions with the world. And this wise interaction is him expressing his character, presence, person in and as creation. And so while I see what he's getting at here with some of Bernard's things, there's still I guess not a full I, I don't know, some of his argumentation here doesn't seem to fully tear down the oneness viewpoint like as he is thinking it does here. Is that making sense so far?
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. I'm not really sure he's building a consistent Trinitarian model here either.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. And like, even if this is a, let's say, because the personification of wisdom, right? This is a very fanciful way of God's self-expression of how he explains his word, right? Nonetheless, we don't assume that this way that God has expressed his word, God has expressed, his plan, right? That would automatically mean a distinguishable person from God. And remember, again, from the previous context that he's giving, it's not just the Son and the Father here. He has gone so much to say, because he's trying to go to a plain reading of John, the Word and God, a distinguishable from the Word and God. And I think that causes some bizarre issues for sure.
And just thinking about that also, it like, it doesn't deal with the preceding I mean, you can was that Psalms 33:6? He created everything through his word. I can't remember the one of my thieves in the wisdom literature says that his almighty word leaped from his throne. And I think this is an example of what Dunn calls quasi hypostasis, which, because a literary feature of it, what else? How else would you address it but with personal pronouns and the like? And just like you address any other person, this is why it's personified. That is like the fact that none of that is taken into consideration. As we said earlier, it's really interpreting in a vacuum. And to me, I think that's very sad, because if I'm a Jew in the Second Temple period, especially when this the type of thinking has flourished as far as using these ways of maintaining the transcendence of God, to me, it's like, how in the world can I, as a responsible exegete, not include that?
Yep. Right. No, that makes complete sense. And I think also to clear up what I'm saying is that while I think that his pure reasoning here, right, when he's critiquing Bernard, doesn't quite, I don't think it quite follows. His pointing out of some of Bernard's verbiage here, it does cause us to think that, okay, while I think your reasoning is not quite there yet, or your critique is not quite on point, it does make me perceive that there's a little bit, again, more nuance when we're talking about the self-expression of God. And I don't think it's something Bernard would deny. I think that's why he's being vague in this book on purpose. That's why he would list, thought, plan, he would do all those things, because he's allowing certain vagueness. But now, as we're fine-tuning what we see in Scripture, we are realizing, well, this is God's self-expression. And hopefully that kind of clears up what I'm getting at here. It's not just simply Bernard's just completely right and Burgos doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm just saying that I think while Burgos's argument doesn't completely line up, his reasoning, he still does point out a certain thing that we are already teasing out. Does that make sense?
Well, he also treats his mind and all those things like parts. That's another problem here.
Yeah. That's
right.
That's a good point, Chris, because that was another thing I was thinking of, was that you could just sense the westernized understanding, right? He was very westernized in the way that he was talking about the composition of God here.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's Bernard's viewpoint at all. I think he's making a certain composition of God that Bernard's not even getting at. So that was a good point, Chris.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the other things that I've noticed in his argumentation is, I mean, in part, it's because the type of discussion he's having. No one really here, and to be honest, and to be in part to defend Burgos, no one's really arguing metaphysics here. but in a larger sense, right? Even though these are metaphysical concepts that I'm not saying he's not, but he's not dealing with actual God's, how God is in transcendency and his substance, essence, and nature, and he's not qualifying anything. And then when he makes these type of statements and arguments, it's like he's forgetting what his position is, and we see this all the time. And that's probably one of my biggest things is that, when he says the word is the mind of God, it must be noted that God's mind is not the same as God himself. An element of a whole is not the whole, and either is God's mind God himself. Now, I want you to think about that, and I want you to go back to the qualities that we're literally stating, right? If you're going to say, oh, the word is qualitatively God. Okay, great.
Everything God is, the word is.
Everything God is, the word is. Okay, great. Then if it's identical, except eternal relations of origin, how does that work? He doesn't even realize what he's even doing here to himself. He really doesn't.
It's like, where is the concern for divine simplicity?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then they say, well, no, it's talking about the origin, and well, you have to say that, okay, if the word is qualitatively everything God is, well, wouldn't the word have to be unbegottenness, because the Father is that? So I'm like, how do you like all of a sudden forget all about all that?
Hey, so that's because they're saving those notes for when they're debating Unitarians.
Yeah.
Well, and they just argue like us when they're talking Unitarians.
I know. And I think what's interesting here is actually when I'm going back and I'm looking over this second quote by Bernard's already making qualifications that I think already kind of points out, like, Bernard's mindset is not the same as how Burgos is trying to break down Bernard's reasoning. If you look at that second quotation, because when he's talking about the word here, right, he's talking about being God speaking or God disclosing himself. So Bernard's already making a qualification there. And that's another thing, is I don't think they understand that distinguishment in its fullness, because I don't think he's being dishonest, because it's not like Delcourt. It's not like, oh man, you're so silly. You have this quote where you're lying about Bernard here, and then you quote something else about Bernard 20 pages down the road, and it's already debunking what you actually view about Bernard, and you're just kind of seeming like lying on him. He's doing it back to back here, right? So I think he really does believe what Bernard's saying. I can see him not understanding that vital distinction there with his reasoning of what the mind of God and how word speaks here, and then Bernard's understanding of how God's word is really God's self-disclosure, as you see in the second quote. Now, again, I don't think he's understanding this vital distinction here.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I know you hear people talk about the bar all the time and spoken word, and here's the thing: when we get down to what it means to be the spoken word or a means of revelation, right? Well, if Christ is literally the Word made flesh, it's the word of the Father. Literally, my word has gone out from me and shall not return to me void. Who's that speaking? What's the Father? So if God's word has gone and has gone out from it and was made flesh, his own personal intent, the divine expression, D.A. Carson, the word is made flesh. Whose is it bearing the identity of ultimately? Whose intent? It's the Father. So the word is bearing the revelation, the intent of the Father. If it's made flesh, what does Jesus literally say he is? By his quality of existence. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Why? Because he is the exact representation or the imprint of his hypostasis. Right? Well, if he's the exact representation, that means he's bearing the content and the intent of the origin. Who's originating? Therefore, it is that which is the intent of God revealed, concealed in a man, and then brought forth in his mission.
Yeah.
So, is it Debar? Well, Jesus literally is the Debar of God. He literally verbally expresses and is the conduit of God.
Right.
So it's like everyone wants to argue in either or, and it's not. It's both. It's the material reality, the conceptual intent of God, in his wisdom, and brought forth, and therefore Christ is literally the embodiment, the exact representation of what God would be as true man. Therefore, it's a true son as a true man.
Yeah. And I think this is really interesting here. Bernard's point that he's bringing up, and that is neither in the Jewish context, contemporary context, nor in the Greek or Hellenized contemporary context, is Logos an actual person.
No.
I think that's something to be said. Like that's something that you don't just dismiss. Either from a Trinitarian perspective, you really think John's doing something unique that's against both sides, or you have to admit to some form of development, but you think the development is true. It's divine revelation, So, or both could be technically a form of development, because one, progressive revelation from Old Testament to New Testament. Mm-hmm. The other would be that progressive revelation to the church from the Old and New Testament. So, but yeah, I think that's really interesting. I wonder, do you guys have any other thoughts on this, or do y'all want to get to?
I don't want to get too far. Get too far ahead, but I was thinking, I said, well, when they pulled that was something progressive, I think the only thing progressive, John explains what's progressive, and that's the whole point with the hymn. Like he doesn't, because he doesn't do a lot of he doesn't explain a lot. I think what his novel is that the tabernacling is taking place in a man. Like they're missing the truth. That's what's unique. It's telling you what's
John
unique.
1:14. Yeah, that's the uniqueness of it. That's the, like you said, the progressing.
Is there anything that y'all want to discuss of this part here, or?
This is actually a core issue I had. If you go back up to that highlighted part you had.
Oh, okay, sorry. Here we go.
No, you're good. You're good. Oh yes, while the question of John's prologue is a relevant consideration, it is not necessary for one to be aware of what literature John has called upon in order to understand the characterization that John has made of the Word. Isn't that really crazy that it doesn't, the very, Chris, the very, and Brother Nero, the very personification of wisdom, that kind of, genre, that kind of background doesn't matter because, John gives the Word personal pronouns, just as the author of Proverbs gives Lady Wisdom personal pronouns.
It's an atrocious. That's an atrocious.
You can't. I'm sorry, and here's the thing. I think Burgos is smart, right? I don't think he's dumb by any chance, but I've always heard even smart people say stupid things, right? Even smart people say stupid things every once in a while, right? Well, this is one of those cases where Burgos says something really stupid here. I don't even know how to really
education, such as in South Africa and the Iraq, everywhere, such as, and
yeah, he's using and he makes it sound a little educated, right? He even puts a nice little footnote. If you notice, that footnote's pretty lengthy, and he talks about some of the background information, right? And he talks about some of the language with targums and whatnot. But nonetheless, this statement right here, I just can't. I don't know if you feel any different, Brother Nero or Brother Chris, but this was. Really dumb, retarded.
Not dealing with the background literature. This is what makes something a really the difference between making something a really serious critique versus making it just a polemic.
Yeah. Hey, this is a good playbook out of James White's playbook. Good play out of there. Just reassert. Let's just assert what I wanted to. I don't know. I just can't. Maybe I'm being a little too hard, but this is just one of the worst statements I think I've seen in this chapter.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, you're basically nothing here to see, guys. Nothing.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
not like as a brother knows. But the man behind the camera, there's nothing. Ignore that.
yeah, yeah.
I
Pretty
said,
much. Yeah.
I said stop thinking critically.
Hey,
Yes.
I was thinking clearly, then then a bunch of smoke just came everywhere. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's literally a theological
yeah,
smoke bomb. And it's just
yeah.
really that's just bad.
It's egregious for sure. But
Yeah, because
that's
he
pretty much all I
continues.
got. Okay, on.
No, I say, but at your point there, and he says, rather the means by which one is to understand what has been communicated of the word is to allow John's characterization to speak for
Yes.
itself. Well, how can you do that if you
Hey,
don't know the background?
yeah. Hey, that's like. Here's what's funny about that. Like in those in these movies, or like, I just watched a show today, right? And there was this random uh lady to me because I didn't know her. I didn't know the pop culture reference. I didn't know what kind of singer she was. And in this show, they put her in there like we're all supposed to know who she is. And it was a cop show, and all these cops came in the elevator with her, and she's like, and then one cop said to her, "Oh, I love your music," right? Well, that's like me saying, "Well, forget the background of culture of who culture says she is. We just need to let the show speak for itself, you know." So we don't really know the nature of the singer. We don't really know who this is. We just have to we just put the show in an isolated box, And that's the same thing he's doing with Logos because I think there was one guy in a podcast, and it's pretty good. He kind of sees the Old Testament. It was AJ Holloway as a movie, right? Kind of like with them watching their show. So like the Jewish people are here sitting on watching their show, right? But we're not supposed to know the pop culture reference. We're just supposed to let John speak for himself without any context that he's pulling from. That doesn't matter. You can't. It just can't get worse than that.
He's speaking to people you would think they would understand it.
Yeah, man, it's crazy work. And what's funny in footnote 144, he does kind of give his whole like the idea of the background. Again, it's like one of those things. Man, okay, now I'm just joking around here. Obviously, I'm not doing this as a serious critique, but it reminds me of like that little commercial, right, where it talks about all the what all the good, right, of their product they're trying to sell, and at the very end, in like really small print and really fast speech, they'll tell you all the issues,
Oh,
right?
that really?
Yeah, yeah. We'll put the historical context in the footnotes. We don't need that, But
Yeah.
oh man, yeah.
Well,
Anyways,
read what he says here. He says,
yeah.
thus, it is a careful reading of the text which ought to inform the interpreter, not a preconceived understanding of the term. Well, how in the world do you come to any of that in your own view? What's your basis?
I feel yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, even if one were to, here he goes, however, even if one were to grant that John had drawn upon Old Testament use of debar or the multifaceted Greek concept of the logos, it can be demonstrated that Bernard's dogmatism with regard to the word not being a distinct person is not defensible. Burgos.
It can be argued, right?
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah. And you know what's crazy about that? I was actually reading up on that footnote, right? And he's quoting like Old Testament references, and this is the one that I was talking about. This is oh wait, no, this isn't, but this is part of that because it's the two footnotes. It's footnote 144 and footnote 145. But he thinks he's going to make in the next chapter a very strong argument for why the Old Testament actually demands, in a sense, proto-Trinitarian ideals. And this is where you're kind of seeing really not Bernard's dogmatism, but maybe Bernard's dogmatism, but really at the end of the day, you're seeing Burgos's dogmatism because he's about to make that argument.
Mm-hmm.
He really thinks that we can sense the second person of the Trinity in the Old Testament. And yeah, we'll get to that a different week though, in terms of breaking down his Old Testament oof-ups. But
yeah. But here's the key word right here, folks. Right here. What in the world is this?
Yeah.
Notice if we go back to the first review and what Burgos said a person is, that doesn't line up with classical Trinitarianism. So, what's this?
Right.
Distinct person. So, am I supposed to reference that's how we understand what a distinct person is?
Yeah.
Right? Well,
Yeah.
guess what? If that's the case, then you're not a classical Trinitarian. You're a social Trinitarian and a tritheist
Right.
per classical Trinitarians. And therefore, you're not, matter of fact, you do not have a view. Your view
Right.
of God is way over here. Classical Trinitarians, Unitarians, and Oneness are way over here in their view of what is God. We all believe in one mind, one will, one substance, essence, and nature. We all affirm
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
You're not. So who's the heretic?
Right. Right. And you know what's cracking me up about this, and I don't mean to hyperfixate on that word dogmatism when we talk about Bernard. It's funny. It's just funny to me how he doesn't say Bernard's argument can't be sustained. He just casually throws in the word dogmatism because it puts a nasty ring to it.
Yeah.
I don't know. That cracks me
Heretic.
up.
As if he's not being dogmatic.
Yeah. Hey, and cat's out the bag, y'all. And one of his appendixes of this book, he does try to qualify, or not qualify. He tries to make the argument of why technically the UPCI or Oneness Pentecostals in general are in fact a cult in his viewpoint.
Of course.
Just like the good Reformed Baptist that he is.
Yes.
You got to throw in why we're the heretics and why we're we're a cult. But just
Yeah.
you can't make this stuff up.
But yet, Reformed.
Yeah.
Good luck finding that views of Calvinism and all that, and that as a orthodox doctrine, folks. Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah.
But he goes on next and says, Bernard's statement regarding the identity of the word divulge the assumption that, on his view, the term word is not being used in a metaphorical sense. However, not only does
keep going. No, I just hate but keep going because actually we should read a chunk of this because he starts talking about Sanguinetti too and stuff. So
okay,
yeah.
Howard, not only does the prologue make it evident that John's characterization of the word goes well beyond any first-person experience in the incarnate Son dominating his characterization, although both Targum, Septuagint, Hebrew Bible contributed in differing measures. Wherein I discuss the proto-Trinity theology of the Old Testament as it relates to the Targumic word.
That is why. But
yeah,
you just gonna take the Targums when you say you want to.
Yeah. Given the similarities between the Targumic word and John's logos, John's dependence is obvious and palpable. For example,
just so you know, you stopped. That's not a full sentence.
Is it?
You stopped. So what happened was, because of the way the thing is, if you notice, you were starting to read the sentence that he has, and then you went into the footnote sentence because it was a long paragraph of a footnote. Because I was getting confused with Targumatic. That's the footnote. Yeah, so Bernard being well beyond, it'd be past 145. Which, by the way, the Targumist comment, you're right, Bruno, it is kind of crazy, but that was keep going down. Oh, now it's confusing. Oh, past 145, yeah. Past that. Those are all footnotes. There you go. So here it says they kind of go however, not only does the prologue make evident that John's characterization of the word goes well beyond any flip page definition akin to God speaking or a thought plan expression or mind of God, and then you can continue there.
But John was shown an affinity for using the metaphor to characterize the person of the Son. In the fourth gospel, the Son is identified as the light. 1:7-9. Well, that's an argument. The Lamb of God, 129. The bridegroom, 3:21. The bread, 6:51. The door, 10:7. The good shepherd, 10:11. The way, the truth, and the life, 14:6. And the true vine, 15:1. Consistency would demand that Bernard's insistence upon the rejection of metaphor in 1:1-2 would be equally applied to each of the aforementioned characterizations. Marvin
Well,
Sanguinetti,
yeah. Keep going. Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
Marvin Sanguinetti similarly failed to recognize John's metaphorical application of logos. One observation made in defense of the Oneness Pentecostal position is that the writer of the prologue had at his disposal the word son and father, Petros, and all that. Petros, both used frequently throughout the Gospel of John and among Johannine communities. It seems reasonable to accentuate the point that if the writer wanted to make an emphatic statement of distinction or of unity between the Father and the Son, John 1:1-2 would be the place to do so. But he instead uses the words God and Logos.
Which is ironic.
Huh? Yeah.
Because Burgos really did that. Yeah, keep going.
It is clear that the writer had other authorial intentions. Maybe.
Authorial intentions besides Trinitarian theology in mind. That's what Marvin Sanguinetti says. And he says, Bernard argued further, if God in John 1:1 means God the Father, then the Word is not a different person, for the verse would then read, the Word was with the Father, and the Word was the Father. To make this imply a plurality of persons in God would necessitate a change in definition of God in the middle of the verse. Hayes similarly argued in John, and now he's just laying out all these different arguments from oneness. Hayes is the last one. In John 1:1, who is the God that was with the Logos? The answer would most likely be the Father. Accepting the answer, let us read the text in light of this. You know, the typical oneness apologetics. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with the Father, and the Word was the Father, right? Immediately the pluralists would object because that is not the theology at all. So I think Hayes kind of got a little bit of apologetic language there, the pluralists. That's crazy.
That's his word. I love it.
Yeah. So we would try again by asking the same question: who is God? Now, and you know what I mean. This is simple oneness argumentation that we've seen. In some ways, it's a little bit tongue in cheek. I don't know if it's the most sincere on our part, but let's see here. John 1:14 expresses the identity of both God and the Word. The text states, and the Word became flesh, dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. And then this is his critique of that, though, right here. Therefore, if one allows for the prologue itself to characterize the God of 1:1, and there is no question as to his identity as God the Father. The problem with the construal, the Word was with the Father and the Word was the Father, is that the construction of theos and logos and then, does not use theos as a means to identify logos. If one were to insist that the last clause is an identification of the Word as the God whom he was with, the convertibility of the clause would result, i.e., theos equals logos. And thus, one would have no grammatical basis to deny the convertibility of similar constructions. And then he basically footnotes Graves, predicating the indication. All right. Yeah, so I think what's interesting here with him before we get into his comments with A.T. Robinson is basically this idea, and going back to his us not accepting it as a metaphor. I think first off, when we're looking once again, I know he hates this concept, but historical context. John 1 or his prologue is a hymn. It's connecting wisdom, and like you said, Brother Nero, if he admitted to that, we're seeing connection to the wisdom motif to the Son, but particularly, as God's self-expression, and in John 1:14 that connects it to the Son as the self-expression or the wisdom of God incarnate, right? And so I don't, right then and there, it kind of shows a discontinuation with the rest of John and those different metaphors right there. But even let's say we were to look at this and say that there is some metaphorical sense. Well, in a sense, we can accept a form of metaphor, right? But nonetheless, I don't think that really helps his problem, right? Because he's the one who's trying to take things, in his case, woodenly literal, you know? So I already kind of see confusion with all that. Is that making sense what I'm saying here with like the confusion with what he's saying when he's trying to make everything woodenly literal and then complains to us about not taking a metaphorical sense in his view of the prologue?
It's very
You know what I
selective.
mean?
And maybe I was just wanting too much, but I'm like, I wish he would have announced his interpretive method.
Right.
Like, you know, things it is, because it's just like, sometimes he's critical with it, and then sometimes it's like, no, we just got to read it for what it is. It's kind of like, no, if you're applying the same style of exegesis to it, and the variables across the board, we couldn't argue with you, but it's kind of pick and choose a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I think that's like it does seem inconsistent. That's one of my issues with that, because like again, why are we taking everything like in the prologue so woodenly literal? And you're like, you oneness, to stop looking at the historical context, stop looking at wisdom and putting this kind of weird flavor to it. That's not what John's saying. But now when we're talking about when we say like a word is literally means this in the Old Testament, oh well now, oh you're taking too wooden of a translation, a wooden of a conceptual understanding. Why don't you accept the metaphor that John's clearly playing on, because he has multiple metaphors of Jesus, you know? And I just find that, I don't know, I just find that completely bogus. You know, I don't. It's just like a point where kind of like, you know what I mean? Like it's one of those things you read and you just kind of like put your head back like that. You're just kind of like, what are you talking about? You know? Like it just wasn't, to me, it wasn't his brightest point, for sure. All right.
Now, obviously, this gets into the other parts where,
yeah,
Kai and Logos and all that. Let's see. Yeah, it gets in that, and then of course he talks about the definite aspect of where Graves argues the definite and takes the preverbal predicate as indicating the identification. And you know, Hogstead says Hogstead, and they don't seem to be aware of the implications of such position. I don't think you understand your implications of your argumentation, because literally, I mean, what's wrong with the position? He says that, what did he say earlier? Daniel Wallace forcefully argues qualitative. Okay, but Daniel Wallace also says it's definite is not without merit either. Mm-hmm. It's possible. So, and if we're talking about an add extra reality, and you have a contrast of, like I said, Gnosticism, what's the problem? I don't understand that. But whatever. There's so many things that we can get into, but what else were y'all wanting to get into? I think, let's see. John is saying everything.
Keep going.
No, where you want to go?
Oh, no, just that thing with A.T. Robinson's quote, and not to explain the whole thing, like, but I think it's really interesting when he cites A.T. Robinson's as a source here, and how he shows that by exact and careful language, John denied Sabellianism. Sabellianism. Good Lord. Mm-hmm. But I find that really interesting because this shows you a dogmatic nature here from both the Burgos and the person citing, or that he's citing, because that's a later quote unquote heresy. This would be anachronistic. How would John be espousing against?
We might as well ask John.
You know what I mean? Like, how is he denying that, right?
Yeah. Right. You might as well ask John what was his favorite iPhone.
Right. You might. It's like telling, like, John, what's your favorite baseball team? Oh no, I hate the Yankees. You know,
I know it hasn't been invented yet, but let me let you know.
Yeah. And they could argue Oh, sorry. This last thing. Like
Yeah.
they could argue that John's being careful about this, but they're definitely not being careful about their articulation about this. Because I get what they're getting at, but nonetheless, this articulation to me was horrendous. But
I was just going to bring up. I wanted to bring up again another problem with these type of arguments. He says, "Be exact and careful language." John denied Sabellianism by not saying "ho theos" and "ho logos." Right. That would mean that all of God was expressed in "ho logos," and the terms would be interchangeable, each having the article.
wait, way to destroy like
Yeah,
like the what do you call it? The
yeah.
intra-penetration.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh
how is
my
not
goodness.
God, all of God literally
Yeah.
expressed in the Logos? Classical Trinitarians. I mean, seriously.
And isn't this the same? If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong on this information, but isn't this the same like Robinson that ends up denying certain aspects of how Jesus is pre-existent in the human face of God? Is that the same author? Here, let me.
You're talking about Vines, or are you maybe new to me?
But yeah, that's the whole thing is perichoresis, folks, and inseparable operations and everything. This argument is like, what in the world are you talking about?
J.A.T. Robinson, John Robinson, right here.
Yeah.
Does he denies certain like? In fact, a lot of Unitarians like this work because of it. Like he challenges a lot of presuppositions concerning pre-existence and even incarnational language. That are, so and not to poison the well, but the point is like. It's funny how dogmatic he is in this source right here, Robinson. But then when you read one of these books, I mean, you would
very selective.
I would never have thought this. Yeah, or Robinson changed his mind. I would wonder. Actually, let me check here. When was that? The Pictionary one. Man, Robinson. When was that one published? I know this is probably a minute point, but this is, I mean, that just makes me wonder because, like, he doesn't sound like that in this book. If it's the same person, Robinson, that's Maurice Robinson.
Yeah, A.T. Robinson, right?
1960s, right?
Yeah.
This book is definitely like I'm pretty sure it's new. It's newer. 1973, 13 years later. I'm pretty sure his opinion changed, if I'm not mistaken. So like, it's just something to really consider, With like, I don't know if he would agree with that assessment by the end of his life that he made there, the 60s. So, but
very selective.
Yeah, let me actually. Is there anything else y'all want to add on that? I just don't mean to take over with.
No, you're good.
Comment.
No, it's just I just find it amazing that when you make these type of arguments, that would mean all of God was expressed in Logos, and the terms would be interchangeable. How is it not, Mr. Burgos? Inseparable operations, mutual indwelling, perichoresis, same substance, essence, and nature, because there is only one. Without division. How's it work? So basically, have you just defeated your own argument? Would you not have to accept that? So therefore, you've just shown that, wait a minute, that is a valid argument by your own doctrine. Congratulations. But, he's more social than he is classical anyway. But then I guess a whole bunch of other problems. Let's see. There's a lot that we can get into. This would take forever.
That is my bad, actually. That's two different scholars.
Is it?
I'm pretty sure. As I'm doing my research on this right now.
Oh, he has A.T. Robertson. That's the Greek guy, right?
Well, both are one's John A.T. Robinson.
Yeah, J.A.T. Yeah.
Yeah, and then one's just A.T. Robinson.
Yeah.
At least
I always get them mixed up.
Man, I thought they were the same person. No, man. That makes sense because man, they sound so much different. You know. All right. We do is there anything like for me I just want to briefly cover over the his pronouns, but I'm pretty much done with the John one. And we'll call it a night after that.
Yeah, I wanted just real quick, Brother Nero or you, we can go with the pronouns. Real quickly, I wanted you all to go over. Yeah, A.T. Robertson. Yeah, that's your understanding of wisdom, right? I want to give an basically go through for the audience, breaking down John 1. Just going through it and giving a quick correlation, Tim and Brother Nero, on relating wisdom to this. Because we're breaking him down, but we're not providing we have in part provided different explanation, but I think it would be good to go through and provide the wisdom understanding from a one's position. Yeah.
Do you want to go first, Brother Nero?
Yeah. Yes, sir. I wouldn't mind. I think, and what's fascinating about it, because this is probably, from a scholastic standpoint, one of the most important, I would say, at least scholastic areas that is just not even touched. And one of the most interesting pieces, because personification would really change a lot of things, especially a lot of these dogmatic claims that are really contingent upon the grammar. But I think one of the things important, like, for instance, when you're looking at the prologue, the logos there in the first century, logos and wisdom, they're used interchangeably. That's why I always look at logos as more of the expressed form of wisdom, because it really communicates now the wisdom of God is being made known to all men. But the concept of him being the wisdom being with, dwelling, and many believe that this was already a pre-existing hymn that John has modified for his usage. But I would say that with some of the ideas and many of the ideas that are presented, I'm just pulling up some, especially we hadn't got to verse 3, but the deal with the genitive. And it's one of his strongest arguments, but actually you find that in the wisdom literature. But nobody seems to think it's another person. I think there's so much that's weaponized apologetically. For instance, like at verse 4, I think you can see it that wisdom leads to life, and also wisdom and Torah are used interchangeably. There's a strong functional overlap, like verses 4 through 9, you're dealing with the Johannine motif of light, wisdom as radiant divine activity, primordial light traditions, and then it digs into that revelatory function, which is really prevalent in the Gospel of John. Coming to humanity. And it's one of my favorite wisdom quotes. It talks about wisdom coming down and dwelling in the tents, with the tents of Jacob. And it also segues with the thought of God dwelling with men. But and it uses, interestingly enough, and I don't think this is a coincidence, the same word for tabernacle, which they would have had to been thinking about this. And so now they understood that, speaking from a personification standpoint, that this wisdom was literally the imminent activity of God within the world. And so to say that this is the wisdom and wisdom is doing all of these divine activities, and John not having to reinvent this, where they say, well, how do you know it hasn't changed? Like, no, I don't think the Alexandrian school has had a lot of influence. I don't buy that, the allegory thing, because you need it to be allegory. But what evidence is it that it was not personification? And I just say it's embarrassingly clear. But like I'm going to land a little bit. verses 12 through 13, the concept of children of God, dealing with wisdom children, wisdom Torah forms, the covenant of life. And I think John, it's so many of them, even going to a deeper, dealing with them grammatically. And with some of the parts that are used in the prologue, it's like he's literally copying and pasting a lot of those same thoughts. But I'll lay as my voice is landing.
No, that's good. No, and I know, Brother Nero, we both presented at Symposium last year on this actually very topic of wisdom traditions and some of the Christological hymns. I think, Brother Nero, I think your paper, because you're doing a book length right now, but like your paper was one of your chapters of your future book, and it was particularly on John 1, whereas mine was a little bit more. I covered both, wisdom's journey throughout Old Testament and Intertestamental periods, and then connecting that with John 1's prologue, and then also with the hymn in Colossians 1. But nonetheless, when I'm looking at like here with John's prologue and how he connects to wisdom, right? And or how he connects, Jesus with wisdom. One of the things I recognized in the very beginning is, despite many people's thoughts, even within oneness sects, really, Jesus should not be conflated with the Logos in John 1:1. I recognize that. That's part of the hymn here, is when you're connecting it with the wisdom traditions, it's showing God's self-expression, God expressing his why. Because when I did my research on the pilgrimage of wisdom, what I realized is what wisdom is, even through Second Temple period and the wisdom literature there. Lady Wisdom is ultimately God's wise interactions with the world. It's God, and it's particularly a little multifaceted, right? It's God expressing his character, person. He's expressing his presence in and as creation. So that's what I kind of see, and what we see that is he's expressing himself in as creation in the written Torah. He's expressing himself, and this time that tabernacle language that Brandon was talking about. He's expressing himself in and as the wisdom that man receives, right? And the ultimate climax here in God's story, and this is in John 1:14, is that wisdom is she is being manifested in and as the man Jesus Christ. And to kind of give a little, show you more so where this hymn kind of, where you see the relations of this hymn and how John connects it, is you have this language of in the beginning, right? And this is calling back creation. Well, wisdom literature calls Lady Wisdom back to creation with the Father. And that's that language that Bernardino's talking about with this pros language, with this with language, right? And this is not face-to-face literally, but this is talking about a literary device to explain how God has expressed his divine presence, his divine plan in and as creation, right? And so that's why we have this distinction between wisdom and God. And like Burgos said, and I think this is one thing he actually did get correct. The distinguishment isn't between here, right? The Father and the Son here, the second person of the Trinity, the Son, God the Son, right? But rather, this distinction is between God and the Word, God and wisdom. And we further see this idea that wisdom is not just with God. It's not just creation, but it's actually what I would call, when it says was God, it's actually qualitative, because it's showing that's God's self-expression. That's the kind of language that how I'm understanding was God. Yeah, was God, right? And then when we're looking at the kind of following, because this way he does in the hymn, is John is following the pilgrimage of wisdom, right? You see this with not just all things were made, that's part of the creation, but you see this idea with it's this idea where she came unto her own and her own received her not, kind of language, right? And a lot would that concept there with her own, it would be talking about the Jewish people, and this wouldn't really be talking about Jesus in his days of his flesh, although it applies to that, because once again, wisdom is still rejected by her people. It's still rejected. God, his covenant people, his wisdom is still being rejected, even when it's fully embodied in and as the man Jesus. So it applies to Jesus, the patterns there, but nonetheless, when this hymn is talking talking out, it's not talking about a past event of already what happened in Jesus, but more so talking about the woes of wisdom. Think about Proverbs, the end of Proverbs 1, where wisdom's crying out, but they're not listening. So wisdom now rejects their cries. When they're crying for mercy, wisdom rejects it. Wisdom laughs at their calamity. And that's the kind of the woes of wisdom there. The ironicness of those who do not listen to wisdom. And once again, it is really a slap to those who, because you think about this from the perspective of a Jew listening to his wisdom literature, and maybe even having Proverbs in mind here, realizing that the man whom they crucified, that is the fullness of God's wisdom embodied. So when the wisdom of God fully embodied was here, right in front of their face, right in front of them, they rejected, just like they have rejected wisdom for generations to generations to generations. They have rejected God's wisdom over and over again. And even this time when it's fully embodied in and as the man Jesus, there's still a rejection there. But to those who do not reject, right, they will be born again. They will not be born from below, but born from above. They won't be earthly, but heavenly. And that's right there already shows you, as John's setting this up, that this language of heavenly isn't to show a and even as one that sometimes we do this, it's not to show I'm trying to be careful the way I say this, but it's not to show a divinity in that concept, right? But more so, again, it's showing you the core of someone. Just as Jesus, the firstborn of new creation, when we are born again, we will be born from heaven. So then that idea where he's coming from heaven, that's again talking about the source of Jesus, not necessarily the location of Jesus before his pre-existence. And that's why it all kind of bundles up and connects once again to the wisdom tradition. And that is that the fullness of God's wisdom is now fully embodied in and as the man Jesus, and that his plan is the climax of everything, which leads to the releasing of the Spirit, which leads to the transformation of the church, and ultimately we have the future hope of ultimate glorification and being in the presence of God fully.
Could I, and as you know,
Yeah.
I'm going to read this piece on Rendell Harris. I don't want to take up too much time on it, but it's one of his interesting quotes, and I'm going to try to get through it fast. The first thing that needs to be emphasized is that we are obliged to take a different view of the Greek of the fourth gospel from that which is commonly taken by New Testament exegetes. They are in the habit of describing the Greek of the gospel as simple, but correct, and of contrasting it in the respect with the Greek of the apocalypse. Our position is that the very first verse of the gospel ought to have undeceived them. You can tell it's written 100 years ago, as the linguistic accuracy of the writer, and to have marked him as a barbarian in the Greek sense. In other words, ein proston theon is not Greek at all. And a Greek scholar ought to have felt this at the very first reading. The very subtleties, which are read in the expression are self-condemned, in that they can neither be justified by the theological thought of the time when the book was composed, nor can they be made to harmonize with the assumed simplicity of the writer's diction. With the due of the studies upon him, and in the sense very far removed from the possibilities of understanding Hellenistic Greek, begin to translate. He's going to try to find the phrase. Here it is. And this is something he says I thought was very fascinating about that. He says it is the equivalent when he deals with the Arabic of proston theon, that it's literally it comes from it makes more sense if you're an Arabic speaker, like an Arabic speaker that's speaking Greek. And he said it's really more evidence of his want of Greek. And he is almost like my friend Felix. I talk to him time to time, and his first language is Spanish. Now he speaks good English to me, but he says a lot of times when it's time to quote the Bible, he pauses. He says, no, I know it by heart. He says, but I learned the verses in Spanish, and I'm trying to quote them back in English. And it's always interesting to hear him do that. And I think this is kind of what's going on. He's communicating from an Aramaic thought, but pushing it through a Greek prism. And when I first read that, I said, wow, and anybody that hasn't looked at it, you need to go look at this chapter where he deals with the Arabic. And he's like, it makes perfect sense if you're an Arabic speaker. Perfect sense. But he said it's kind of clunky if you're a Greek speaker.
Yeah, that's one of the big things, but hey, we don't need to worry about that.
Don't bring your presuppositions with you.
We we need to just do what John's here, but we're not going to actually establish the framework by which this would be possibly interpreted. But we're just going to here's what I'm feeding you. Here's the manna from Trinity. Take and eat. No, instead of the text, the potential understandings and basis by which the writer would be writing these in the background. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've read that. That book is an excellent book. Matter of fact, it's free, everyone. That is
years ago.
Yeah, it's a great book. Highly recommend. I think you get that on. I think Google. You can get that on Google Books, can't you? I believe. I think is that where I got that.
You can Google it like in the search thing, and then it'll come up. And what I'm gonna do
down as a free download PDF. I think that's where I got it.
And if you want it, I would tell them, say, email me, and it's in the public domain. I will definitely get it to you. And I will leave a footnote of in the chat with our friend James Thomas. He follows me around like the young lady in Act 16. A little bit. It's supposed to have a debate set up, but he's very busy. But he makes time to leave comments, and I appreciate you, sir.
Yeah, that's one. We're always allowing Trinitarians to express their opinions, and we don't have a problem with that at all. But the main thing is consistency. That's the thing. That's the only thing we actually ask of Burgos is consistency in his views. Sometimes he's there, sometimes he's not, at least to say. So let's go on and do the pronouns and natures of God.
And we'll stop there because it's a quick thing because most of that's just him citing verses. There's no it's more anecdotal. That's why it looks like, even then it's only a page long. But I think
so.
There's no reason to really read through it. Well, okay. Yeah, I don't. Well, let me look. I don't know if there's actually. You know what? Don't read through the whole thing, right? But read. Where's it at? Just like read the first paragraph, and we'll go from there. There's no reason to read the quotations that he's making.
Yeah.
Let me do this. When you look at the oneness adherents, right? You can put it up on the screen. But have attempted to marshal evidence for Unitarianism based upon the use of singular personal pronouns used of Yahweh in the Old Testament, especially as found within the monotheistic decrees of Isaiah. So he puts a footnote here. I thought this was really funny because in footnote 154 it says this is also a tactic typically used by so-called biblical puts that in little quotation marks Unitarians. Hey Dustin, we got the come smoke this dude. But no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But it was funny that he did that. Because he's trying to first of all, he's trying to say that Unitarians aren't biblical, but secondly, it's just funny how he's just trying to like lump us all in and be like, yeah, they're just
about association.
They're all against truth, And he cites a couple oneness believers and how they focus on that the singular pronouns of God in the Old Testament and how they're overwhelming. And it's true, they are overwhelming. He doesn't deny that. But nonetheless, he starts citing a ton of verses in the ESV. Go figure. And so with that, he's focusing on verses where it shows like singular pronouns, but it's referring to Israel, right? Or referring, it's just referring to kind of like a collective singular there, right? And so he's showing a plurality within the singular. And with those verses he cites towards the end, right, of his thing, and I'll just read this last paragraph because we kind of get the context of what he's doing. He says, a related consideration that is rarely mentioned by oneness interpreters is John's use of singular personal pronouns in his description of the word. In John chapter 1, verses 2 through 4, and the topically connected clause in verse 10, the world was made through him. There are no less than 4 personal pronouns used to describe the pre-incarnate Word. Hence, if one were to consistently adopt the oneness contention regarding personal pronouns, one would be forced either to affirm the existence of contradiction in the scriptures, or they would be driven to harmonize the personhood of the Word and the singular personal pronouns used of God in the Old Testament. The latter position relies upon the analogy of Scripture and allows all the biblical revelation of God to speak authoritatively. I could just see him as he's ending off this chapter like that, just smiling as he wrote this, like he really got us. And really, it was garbage. Listen, this is why historical context matters. Again, when we're looking at the wisdom traditions, and as Brother Nero, use that term again, where you talk about the literary person, right?
Quasi-hypostasis.
Quasi-hypostasis, a literary person, right?
Yeah.
When you're looking at this kind of language, we can concede to there being literary persons, but doesn't mean they're literally a metaphysical person, right? So right then and there is always, and this is what I always like to tell people, because when people try to give me these either or fallacies like this, I always like to say there's always an option 3. There's always a third option. And Burgos seems to fail to realize there is always a third option. And the third option, and maybe I'm just off on a limb here, it's that if you take the historical context into account here, the wisdom tradition shows a literary person, a quasi-hypostasis, but doesn't necessarily refer to a literal, distinguishable second person within the Godhead. The pre-incarnate Word isn't really referring to an actual metaphysical person within the Godhead. Much rather, the Word is, again, personified wisdom, God expressed in and as creation. And I don't think it takes a genius to really figure that out. So I get a little bit confused when we start seeing paragraphs like this, like they really got us. It just, I don't know. Do y'all have any commentary on this? Because I get like enamored with this kind of craziness.
No, it just sometimes is like, well, and sometimes like, well, maybe we just write something on it, but it's just like, yeah, it's not that good of an argument.
Yeah, no, it was terrible. It was, man, it's right up there with this. Like they're related. It's right up there with that. We don't really need to worry about the historical context to know what John meant. Kind of garbage,
Mhm.
Yeah, it's just like why would you? Oh, either the scripture contradicts or the word is pre-existent and truly personal.
It's like, if you don't believe me, you don't love Jesus.
Right. So Chris, are you calling Jesus a liar?
Yeah, you calling Jesus a liar?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Because my position is the words of God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, what happens when you do personify clear attributes?
Yeah.
Is the Bible? Are we just gonna let the Bible speak for itself and realize that you got like peace and stuff that's actually a person?
Mhm.
Like when it's following after me, right? And the psalm, like, is that really just a person? And I just I misinterpreted. I'm
Grammar
not letting the
demands
Bible speak, or is it contradicting? I think what he's realizing, he's trying to take away from the weight, but in reality, the issue, right? Unless he wants to say that God is just a literary device for abstract substance, right? We know in the narrative, in the historical context, that this God is genuinely relational with his people. It's about our relational God. And the problem with that is that when you're looking at certain aspects of the Trinity, and of course it depends. Sometimes it depends the model, but a lot of times, and a lot of many different models, and it looks like certainly in Burgos's model, there's times where you could probably rightly call, as Albie likes to say, a they. The Trinity can be a they in some sense.
Yeah.
And we have issues with that because time and time again in the Old Testament, God is relational as a he to his people, right? But wait a minute. When they start talking about like certain,
It's a
are they the ones who also
community.
make a big to do about very vague what do you call it, plural pronouns when we're looking at Genesis 1:26? Aren't they the ones that do that? So like I just don't, what is he trying to get at here with this? Because like
It seems like
I
they
don't
try to qualify these exceptions.
right. it just seems like a double standard to me, maybe. Because it's not really, again, it's not really looking at our contention. Our contention is you have a God who is relational with his people, right? You know, in Israel, although it's clearly a collective, right? Israel's clearly a collective based off the context. It's a collective of
The
people.
context
But even
qualifies.
then, right? And if anything, Israel isn't a literal person. Israel is a personification of a nation. You know, so like context is everything, right? So
Right.
either we're gonna say that God is really a personification for something else, or God is a literal he. You know, but maybe he can give me his third option on that. So
Well, and to me, it's kind of like one of those things. Is like, and I actually said this in a debate I had previously. I'm not saying that it's not possible. Actually, I would say that it is, and we do see it, like with the children of Israel. But that doesn't mean that. How do I stop myself from seeing when I see Jacob described as a he? Well, Jacob is really a plurality there. Like, how do I protect myself from abuse of this? Because the way they're having it, anybody can just modify when they get ready. And the thing, and as you said, the context is going to tell me when I should not understand the pronoun within its natural meaning, or that the author is doing a special modification of it. And I thought to myself on it, I said, well, one person counted about 20,000 times singular pronouns in reference to God. I haven't counted myself, but I said, well, let's just take that and use it. Let's just cut it in half and use 10,000. If I had 10,000 plural pronouns in reference to God, I would be a Trinitarian right now, because who in their right mind would argue again? I'm like, that is an embarrassing wealth of indication that God is tri-personal or multi. I mean, it could be 50 person for all we know. But I said, now wait, the only problem is we don't have that. Right. We have it in the singular. So right. I wonder who's crazy.
Yeah, no, that's exactly. And I think one thing we can kind of settle on here, at least what it looks like from the information we're given right now, Burgos is not a monarchian Trinitarian, like a monarchical Trinitarian, sorry. Because even them, how they settle this idea with the he, right? Well, God is, the Father is the only one who's nominally God, you know? You had a nobody, Dom, just having a whole debate with, who was it? Legacy about this, And I don't think Dom's an outsider when it comes to how a monarchian view is whole. Like, they don't think that, they think only the Father is nominally God. So that's how they deal with it. That's how they deal with that, all these things.
Issue with it.
But, this guy wants to start gaslighting. That's what it seems like Burgos' plan is. Is to start gaslighting with these verses, where in context we can really see that this is a personification of a nation, So it's like, oh, okay, sure thing, Burgos. Whatever makes you feel better.
Interpretive transparency is a must.
Yeah. I mean, but like, man, because like there's some things he'll say he's so smart, and then there's other things he say you're like, Burgos, this is dumb. And I'm sure anyone who will ever read my stuff will probably think the same thing. But man, these are one of those moments where Burgos like this is idiotic. So, but anyways, I really got nothing else to say with all this, and I think there's no point to even Chris. I think we're already going 2 hours and 30 minutes, so
yeah.
Technically, there's 3 pages left in this chapter, and it's just talking about progressive revelation, basically,
or divergent revelation.
Yeah, which I have that's the thing. Like, I don't really care for really accepting that method of progress, because there's like, it's almost like I don't know. Like, first of all, it depends who you're talking about when you talk about progressive revelation. And then most people who accept this, like, well, no, as Oneness Pentecostals, don't really agree with all that, So there's just, you can't really fully just accept progressive
once delivered for all, once for all delivered unto the saints.
Yeah. Well,
Well, the problem is that when you go to John 16:25, Jesus says very clearly that I will show you plainly of the Father. Well,
right.
Okay, if Jesus is going to show you plainly of the Father, why isn't he showing you plainly of the Trinity? Who's right. Jesus here to reveal? Who is he here to reveal? He's revealed the Father. Well, that's what the Word does, right?
Right.
The Word is the content. This is why, and I wanted to do this real quick. Paul begins Ephesians 1 by identifying God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ as the acting subject. It is the Father who blessed us in Christ, chosen us in him, predestined us according to the good purpose and pleasure of his will, made us acceptable in the beloved, revealed the mystery of his will, purposed the saving plan in himself, and the works in all things according to the counsel of his, the Father's will. It is also the Father who exercises his power in Christ by raising him from the dead, seating him at his right hand, putting all things under his feet, and giving him to be head over the church. So whose will is it? Whose purpose? Whose counsel? Whose grace? Whose power? Whose work? Who raises, exalts, gives authority, brings all things together in Christ. According to the grammatical subject running through the Ephesians 1, it is the Father. Paul then calls him the Father of glory and speaks of the spirit of the wisdom that he gives and the exceeding greatness of his power, which he wrought in Christ when he raised him from the dead. In Ephesians 1, 17 through 20. The Father could therefore ask, is it not my glory, my wisdom, my will, my purpose, my power, my work that are realized in Christ? Christ is not presented there as a second originating divine subject alongside the Father. He is the beloved in whom the Father's will is accomplished. Redemption is realized, and the inheritance is obtained. All things are gathered together. That does not make Jesus merely an instrument. He is the real Son who obeys, gives himself, dies, rises, reigns. But the divine purpose he realizes originates in the Father. Now apply the same question elsewhere. Colossians 1 first identifies the Father as the one who delivers us from the darkness and translates us into the kingdom of his beloved Son. Paul then says the Son is the image of the invisible God. Is the image of the invisible God in that context the Father? If so, is it not the Father who can say, it is in whom is it not I whom he images? Hebrews says that God formerly spoke through the prophets and has now spoken in a Son. That Son is the brightness of his glory, the express image of his person. Who is the God whose glory radiates through the Son? Whose person or hypostasis does he exactly represent? Is that not the Father who is speaking through him? Is it not the Father? Cannot the Father ask, is it not my glory in which he is the radiance? Is it not my hypostasis that he exactly represents? 2 Corinthians says the glory of God is known in the face of Jesus Christ. 2 Corinthians 4:6, it also says, all things are of God, who hath reconciled us to himself by Jesus Christ. God was in Christ reconciling the world unto himself. Who is the acting subject? Who is in Christ? Who performs reconciliation? To whom is the world reconciled? Would this not also allow the Father to say, was it not I in Christ reconciling the world to myself? Jesus himself makes this reference explicit. Philip does not ask to see the Trinity or an abstract divine essence. He says, Lord, show us the Father. Jesus answered, he that has seen me hath seen the Father. And then explained that the Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. Jesus also said, he that seeth me has seen him that sent me. How can anyone take those statements and insist that the divine person ultimately being seen is someone else? The man visibly standing before Philip is the Son. But Jesus identifies the invisible divine referent revealed through him as the Father. The Father is in him, speaks through him, and performs the works. The distinction is already present in the incarnation. Jesus is the visible, sent, the obedient human Son. The Father is the invisible God, whose word, glory, character, power, presence are perfectly realized in him. We do not need to insert another invisible divine person between the Father and the man in order to explain the distinction. John 1 says, the word was made flesh. Whose word is it? If it is the Father's own self-expression, could the Father not say, it is not my word that became flesh? Is it not my wisdom, intention, and character that my word expresses? Scripture says that Yahweh alone is Savior. Yahweh alone declares his arm brought salvation and asks to whom the arm of the Lord is revealed. Then the child is named Jesus because he shall save his people from their sins. He is called Emmanuel, God with us. So, Trinitarians, the question is simple. We've discussed it tonight very in depth. The question is who is Jesus Christ? Who's ultimately the reality and the underlying reality of that Christ? It says here, it's the Word. Now, define logos, define wisdom, and define it and the particular properties that it exists by, how it relates to the Father. Because if it's all identical, right, it's qualitative, please show me the distinctive values that make it actually personal. Because it's actually the ultimate reality of the Father. Because it is the Father that can say all throughout the text, is it not I? Because he reveals the intention of the Father. He is the image of the Father. He is the expression of the one God, the Father. If all their purpose and intent is to realize him, then why would you not understand that the very expression is the Son and the one God manifested in flesh? Well, I end there.
Because it's got to be the Trinity.
But anybody else have anything? I think we're about 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's about good. I'm loving the commentary from James over there.
He will do everything but actually give the date that he wants to have the debate.
Yeah. He does realize that we hold to a wisdom perspective on John. So when you say the Word is the instrument, yeah, wisdom's the instrument.
James
like
isn't.
Right. Wisdom is the semi ad extra version of the Hebrew mind. That's what wisdom is. It's God expressed and realized as the ad extra reality of God. That's basically kind of how wisdom somewhat lines up.
Yeah. And if wisdom is to be conflated with the Son, like he's saying with Hebrews 1, then why would it be in these last days that he speaks by his Son?
I'm telling you,
he was speaking about wisdom this whole time. Wisdom has been in the mouth of the prophets this whole time, so it still would be through the Son the entire time. So why is it now these last days?
I'll tell you, until you talk to James Thomas, you'll see why exegetical necessity is. He's fearfully and wonderfully made. Yeah, I say, James, you're fearfully and wonderfully made by God.
Well, we all have our systems that we believe in, and it's ultimately you have to prove it not just simply by one text. The problem is Paul and others recognize and literally declare the Father is the one God. Period. There is no exception. Throughout it, and ultimately the problem is that if you want to even go to John 1, I want to take it an absolute personal. It doesn't even prove Trinitarianism. You have to get through Arianism and other views as well. So it doesn't even at that point, it really doesn't matter. Even you can even take a logocentric view of quality and still be oneness. And so most people don't understand that, but you just simply seeing personal qualities given to something or personal pronouns in a certain sense doesn't mean it's an actual person. And again, you have to define what person is. I need to know what your personal qualities are. If it's a personification of the one, that's great. If it's just simply subsisting relation, what does that even mean? I mean, besides simply saying it's real. A real what? No distinctions at all. But I don't know if James is a social Trinitarian or classical. That'd be.
He is very social.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Yeah.
He believes in the theodicy of all three persons.
Oh, wow. So basically, you don't believe in classical Trinitarianism. Interesting.
He said he don't care. I appreciate that. He can stick to them guns. He's like, I don't care what they said.
I do respect individualism in some areas, Definitely, yeah. At least you're not making people. You're walking your own walk. I do understand.
Mm. So I guess is Pastor Sam his sidekick, or is he Pastor Sam's sidekick?
No, they flow in different streams of perichoretic Trinitarian thought. They're different, but
They're intertwined.
yeah,
They're
it's
distinct, but they're interpenetrating. Yeah.
I'll say James is a little bit. I say James is probably a great deal sharper on the Trinity than Sam, though.
Interesting.
He's a little bit sharper, you said. So
I think he's a great deal more competent.
So Sam's the sidekick.
Yeah. I don't know. He probably has to grow a little bit more to be the sidekick.
Oh man, he can't even put on that Robin suit. That's crazy.
No, unfortunately.
Yeah, Hebrews 1:1-3. I don't think that one's going to help you.
James don't care about no context.
Yeah. One also, I mean, everyone has their own perspective of the prologue in contrast to other prologues, Hebrews or Colossians or whatever. But yeah,
ask him right quick, like James, is the Son I say?
Is the Son I say relationally?
He gets quiet. I believe in no. I ask you, is the Son I say, James?
Oh, he says he's classical. Well,
yeah, he ain't gonna answer that.
Yeah. But the problem is this: as I tell all Trinitarians, and even oneness, I'll tell you, I don't care about your claims. I care about your economy.
Right.
Number one of the most common things you'll ever hear me talk about, it's economy, economy, and economy. If your arguments bring about social Trinitarian qualities, you're a social Trinitarian, and ultimately you're a tritheist. There's no way around it. So I do appreciate a true classical Trinitarian. The problem is they're like unicorns. They're good luck finding one. But yeah, that's great. I hope you do believe in one mind and one will, substance, essence, and nature. I do appreciate that if you do. You'd be at least on one side of a view of God. Appreciate that. Well, I think we're all good, brothers, for the night. I thank you all very much for joining Brother Nero and Tim.
Oh, I thought we had 10 more pages to go over.
Oh, you want? Okay, let's go.
No, I got working away.
I want to be one that's real on that couch. We stay up too late.
Yeah. Well, everyone, thank you for joining. We truly appreciate it. Watch the other videos also on this that we've done in the book review on Burgos's. Like I said, we covered quite a few points on Colossians, Hebrews, and now John 1, and the first part of his book as well. So thank you all for joining. I appreciate y'all. Please like and subscribe. Also, please go to Brother Nero's and Tim's channels as well. Please like and subscribe them as well. Thank y'all, and God bless. Hope y'all have a great night. Thank you.
Blessings.